Please be seated. Dear colleagues, please be seated. We will start. We already have a bit of a delay, and we only have 30 minutes with our Secretary General, so I would appreciate that we could start without any delay. I welcome the President of the Congress, who is like a fixed guest to us. Very welcome, President. I like that. I like that very much. The sitting is open, dear colleagues. The first point is the election of Judge to the European Court of Human Rights. In respect of Croatia, I will announce the results. Members voting 207, spoiled or blank ballots 4, votes cast 203, absolute majority being 102. The votes were cast as followed. Mr. Marin Mrčela 5, Ms. Lovorka Kusan 65, Mr. Davor Derenčinović, I hope I said that well. Very good. Okay, 133. So, Mr. Davor Derenčinović, having obtained an absolute majority of votes cast, is elected Judge of the European Court on Human Rights for a term of office of 9 years, which shall commence on January 2nd, 2022. Congratulations, and I hope you will do a fine job. We then come to our next item on the agenda, which is questions to our Secretary General, Madam Marija PEJČINOVIĆ-BURIĆ. I remind the Assembly that questions must be limited to 1 minute. Colleagues should be asking a single question, not making speeches. I always have to repeat that. Madam Secretary General, I'm not going to give a long introduction because half an hour is a bit too short. We work extremely well together, so I'll leave it at that. And you have the floor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Voilà. Monsieur le Président, moi j'ai compris que je suis ouverte pour les questions, donc j'attends les questions d'abord.
Ben, c'est super ça. Moi
Voilà.
je pensais que vous alliez faire une grande déclaration qui allait nous surprendre, mais ce n'est pas le cas, donc c'est super. Voilà. Alors on va commencer avec les questions des groupes politiques. C'est une à la fois dans ce cas-ci, 1 minute max. Nous avons en premier, first we have Baroness Doreen Massey, Socialist Group. She should be online. If we can have Baroness Massey. Oops. Okay, can we have... I cannot control it from here. Does she have the floor? Okay, good.
Madam Secretary General, thank you for being here. And I want to ask you how you foresee the development of cooperation and collaboration between the European Parliament, European Commission and the Council of Europe. What would be your aims for such cooperation? Thank you.
Madam Secretary General.
Thank you very much. Council of Europe and European Union, including this institution you mentioned, European Parliament and European Commission, are long-standing cooperation partners with the Council of Europe, and our link, more formal, dates back to 2007, since when we have the specific memorandum of understanding. So accordingly, we have shared values, as we mentioned very clearly in this memorandum of understanding, namely democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And on that basis, in respect with our different mandates, we have cooperation on different levels. One level is high political meetings. That I can mention on my side that I met recently here in Strasbourg by video conference or by in presence several commissioners, vice presidents of the Commission, Mr. Borrell, Madam Šuica, Executive Vice President Vestager, and previously I also met some other commissioners that are pertinent to our work, Commissioner Reinders, Vice President Jourova, Commissioner Dalli, Commissioner Verhali, and wouldn't it be for the pandemic, I think this number of meetings and this exchange would be even higher than what it is. So this is for the political dialogue. Of course, the themes depend on the portfolio and on the themes that we choose mutually. But of course, everything is how to enhance our mutual work in cooperation, because other than high political dialogue, we have legal cooperation, meaning cooperation among our specific bodies and specific organs or institutions within the European Union. And also cooperation projects. And I must say that within that particular part, European Union is our biggest partner in terms of volume and value, but also in terms of number of activities that we have together, either in our member states or in our neighborhood or in European Union neighborhood, be it on the east or on the south from European Union. So I see that, and this is according also to the latest decision and discussion at with the Committee of Ministers in Hamburg. They underlined the importance that the Council of Europe has very intensive and more intensive in the future relations with number of international organizations. I think altogether in different fora we have almost 100 with which we cooperate. But if we take a few that we really are very much working together is UN, OSCE, and EU. So Committee of Ministers clearly asked that we work more together, that we try to avoid overlaps, and of course it goes without saying, all our members, all members of the European Union are our members. So I think for all those countries, but also for other member states of the Council of Europe, it is important that we avoid duplication and that when we do work in the same area, that the work is done coherently, be it on artificial intelligence as new area, environment protection, or equality, anti-discrimination, and so on. So I see our work pertinent, more important than ever, because I think today we all in multilateral fora realize how important the work of each of us is, but also how important it is to have this close interaction in order to fortify our works mutually when we work in similar areas and when our work is resting on the same shared values.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General. Next on the list is Elvira Kovac for EPP. Elvira, you have the floor.
Madam Secretary General, it goes without any saying that a number of challenges are endangering the capacity to protect the rights of persons belonging to national minorities in Europe. Madam Secretary General, how to ensure states to refraining from withdrawing already acquired Council of Europe standards in protecting minority rights and to completing, wherever necessary, the adoption of comprehensive legislative framework for the protection of the rights of persons belonging to national minorities in full consultation with their representatives. Thank you.
Secretary General.
Thank you very much for this question. National minorities are important area of our work, and as you heard from the new chair of the Committee of Ministers, it's also the priority of the current chair. So it goes without saying that this is when it comes to the COVID and how much COVID has had an impact and unfortunately very often a negative impact on several groups in the society, several vulnerable groups in some areas that could be attributed to minorities, has shown that relying on the standards that we at the Council of Europe have developed, which are two big conventions, one of Framework Convention on national minorities and the other European Charter on regional and national and minority languages, are the two big important instruments that a number of our member states have signed and ratified, And these two conventions have their monitoring bodies that in regular cycles go to respective countries and then do their monitoring work, make recommendations how to improve the situation. So I think that very important work in this area by the Council of Europe and by the Committee of Ministers has been done in making these two monitoring bodies of the two conventions more efficient and more effective. And I think with this reform of the mechanisms, I expect that in the future their work will be better and to the benefit of minorities, but also to the respective countries that they belong. So I think that working and underlining the importance of the standards and making standards workable in each of our country when it comes to the national minorities is very important for their protection. But that it is always say, you know, our societies and our member states are strong as much as it's strong their weakest part. And sometimes in some of our member states, national minorities have quite a weak status. So I think we need all to strengthen our work and more political will in order to implement all those standards and recommendations that are done by our conventions.
Next on my list is Julia Ovčíniková, ALDE. Julia, you have the floor.
Dear Madam Secretary General, one of the key world priorities today is the environmental policy and action to deal with the climate and sustainable challenges. Human rights and environment is one of the key priorities of our President of Assembly and also of our political group. So my question is, what is the place of the environmental policy in the list of priorities of Council of Europe? And can the ALDE Group and European citizens hope that Council of Europe will actively engage in the creation of legally binding instrument on the subject in the near future? And what is your position as the Secretary General, and will you support this initiative? Thank you.
Secretary General.
Thank you very much. Actually, to answer by the end of your question, one of the priorities in the strategic framework that I have put together and sent to the deputies, to the Committee of Ministers, comprised environment versus human rights as a new priority together with the artificial intelligence. So clearly, as I have put it, as among the strategic priorities for the next 4-year term, that this is speaking by itself, that it's my clear priority as well, that we work together to find a proper answer to one of the biggest probably challenges of our times. And now coming back to the environment as such, I must confess, when I came to the Council of Europe, this talking about environment and human rights and about possibly thinking of a specific legal instrument on that was, let's say, quite shy at the moment. And then came 3 presidencies, one after the other, Georgian first, Greek second, and then German after that, which all 3 embraced this policy. And I think that was really at a very appropriate timing. And this is, I think, showing quite clearly when 3 presidencies, one after the other, are behind one important priorities, and when it's a new area where you need really to have all the stakeholders around, then it is important that these priorities are upheld, and I can only thank all 3 presidencies for their big work on that and priority. And I must say that now no one questions whether we need to work on that. I know that the Parliamentary Assembly has been vocal, as very often on many themes, ahead of times or before, because you have this capacity to think in the future, and then when time comes to work together with the Committee of Ministers and others on that. So at this moment, there were certain decisions that were taken in the Hamburg ministerial, and the work is underway for possibly finding elements for some legally binding and some non-legally binding parts of the future possible legal instrument. Of course, on that, the proper work needs to be done, so this is also, the work has started. And if I'm recalling well, the rendezvous clause is for the next ministerial to see how we go with the environment, but to say that the whole organization embraces it, it was supposed to happen last year. It's happening 12 months since last November until this November. We will have the biggest event that we have in the Council of Europe, which is Democracy Forum, dedicated to can democracy save the environment? And since, because of the COVID, it couldn't take place last year, it was very, I would say, intelligently decided by the stakeholders who are partners for the forum to have each month one theme related to this pertinent question. And I hope that pandemic will be easing or going away, and that in November we will have a big forum, as we always do, on a very pertinent issue. So I think we are on the right track, and this shows how quickly we can all, when joining the forces together, we can really put our forces and work. And I think if I take 2 years time, 2 years back, we really, I think, gone quite a while, and certainly Parliamentary Assembly and the President, who embraced that from the very outset, certainly makes a part of that important stakeholder endeavor in order to give an answer appropriate to our mandate, which is how environmental issues are related to the human rights.
We now come to Barnapal Zygmunt for ECDA. Barnapal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Madam Secretary General, the Conference on the Future of Europe is a unique and timely opportunity for European citizens to debate on Europe's challenges and priorities. The conference is a proposal of the European Commission and the European Parliament, announced in the end of 2019, with the aim of looking at the future of the European Union. It is intended that the conference should involve citizens and European institutions as equal partners and last for 2 years. We consider important that the Council of Europe, as the continent's leading human rights organization, should make its opinion to be heard. In the organization, we have member states which are not part of the European Union, but they might be in the near future, and also countries which are part of our European community. Madam Secretary General, what is your view on the participation of the Council of Europe and its institutions in the process of shaping the future of the European Union and the future of Europe? Thank you.
Secretary General.
Thank you very much for this opinion. So I think the real question is future of Europe or future of European Union. The name of the conference is the Future of Europe. And of course, I myself felt immediately invited to representing Council of Europe to try to find our institutional place there. I know that also the President of the Parliamentary Assembly talked to the President of the European Parliament, so I talked to a Vice President who is in charge of this, this very important coordination of this important work for in the Commission. So obviously, Europe, in this sense, for European Union means European Union. But I still think, and when I discussed with the Vice President Šuica on the substance, the way how they envisage their work, of course, they didn't think about other international organizations, European organizations, how to be included. But when talking about it, as it happened that just a few days ago, the first plenary of the conference started here in Strasbourg, and I think cannot be more than symbolic and important that it did start in Strasbourg, not only because this city is really a symbol of a new Europe after the Second World War, and that our organization was one of the first European organizations that was established here, but also later the younger sister at the time, the European Union, that was a little bit later established, also had one of the seats of its institutions here in Strasbourg. So I think starting from Strasbourg sends by itself very important message. And I got a possibility to address this very plenary by the video message, where my major statement to those who are part of this conference and those who will participate in its work is that it is important because democracy shouldn't be taken for granted. Our two respective organizations are in a way guarantor, each in a different way, but guarantors of democracy, rule of law, and the human rights. And I think that talking about the future of Europe without basic values would be lacking a very important part. So I think this message that we all need, we all owe to Europe and owe to our citizens to all the time engage for democracy, because for democracy to thrive, we need to be very vigilant. We've seen during the pandemic that it can very easily go wrong way unless you keep an eye on it and you remind what are the main and basic fundamental values. So my message was, for the future of Europe, all Europe counts. And that goes without saying. We have almost all countries of geographical Europe as our member states bar the Belarus. For the European Union, there is a neighborhood policy or an enlargement policy, be it whatever, so they encompass more or less also the majority of the Europe as a continent area. So I think from both sides, it is important that as many as possible citizens participate in this debate. And debate is open on their platform, so everyone can give its voice through that. But formally, within the system that is conceived, it is, of course, the institutions of the European Union and the way how they conceived. But I think engaging in this dialogue, which is future of Europe, but future of democratic Europe, I hope, it is important also for our stakeholders, our communities, be it member states of European Union or our member states that are not member of the European Union. Europe is important for all of us.
Thank you. We now come to Tini Cox on behalf of UAL. Tini.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary General. Great to have you here again. While we should be grateful that the pandemic now seems that we are recovering from the pandemic, we have to be worried that another virus seems to infect the structures that should protect our rule of law, our human rights, and our democracy. That in your annual report to the Council of Europe, to the Committee of Ministers that you presented recently, you call it that democracy is in distress. And from a person who does not likes to use big terms as you are, this means something, I think. And how, Madam Secretary General, could we find a vaccine against that threat to democracy, to the rule of law, and to human rights? Because if that would disappear, these core values of the Council of Europe in our 47 member states, the damage would even be bigger than the big damage of a pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for referring to the annual report, because this is my first fully fledged annual report. Last year I reported through a smaller format, which was on one hand because I was not in the office for the whole year, but also because of the pandemic. So it was called multilateralism, partially oriented to the challenges to the multilateral fora, and partially oriented to the COVID-19 and impact on the matters that we are dealing at the Council of Europe and our response to it. So you rightly said the virus, but unfortunately, this virus is not new. We had the problems before pandemic. And if you look at very carefully through different angles that are covered by the annual report, I will not just mention all of them, but look at freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of media expression, judiciary, or anti-discrimination, or human dignity, or just name it, democratic participation. In all areas where we work, we noticed through the work, and I should pay tribute here to all of our monitoring and advisory bodies, because and organs, of course, Parliamentary Assembly, Committee of Ministers, and others, because annual report is a status given in one point in time about what we all do together in our member states, what is the picture related to different topics, and how our different bodies have found if I use your terms, health times, how the status of health is there. So it covers actually 3 last years. And so it shows also the trends from before pandemic in a very short, because there are many very, very useful information in this report. I can say whatever was in difficulty before became many times more in difficulties during the pandemic. So actually pandemic really exacerbated the situation. And now to the remedy or vaccine, there is no one, because the areas are different. However, again, if I'm to take it on our very general term to respond to that, the good thing is that in the annual report also you can see good examples in our countries where not everything went backsliding and down the hill. There are areas where certain member states really moved forward, or in difficult situations found a way. Let's take violence against women, for instance, how some member states found really innovative ways how to assist women when they were blocked and closed with their perpetrators if they were living with the one. So, and other LGBTI communities if they were closed also, and their situation worsened in this respect. So actually what each situation taken as it is. After that, you have kind of remedies or recommendations that are made based on our standards. So we don't need, as I would say, to change a gear. We need to change orientation, completely orientation if we are going a wrong way. So I think standards are there to be respected. Recommendations are very clear. And what I can only hope, and I think when discussing it in different fora, I always called for the follow-up of the annual report, because it doesn't serve, it's not purpose in itself that it exists. It exists to show where what are the trends that we are living through, and how where these trends are negative, we can remedy the situation. So I know that some of our member states have taken it already very seriously, have taken the analysis from the report and also distributed across the board in its administration. So this is the way how to remedy the situation. But of course, it takes a willingness of each and every one of us, I would say also of parliamentarians, to take that seriously and to contribute its way. Everyone can do its own part to contribute to reverse the trends, and especially very bad trends that we have in some areas that are found by the annual report.
Thank you. I think we can squeeze in the next series of 5 questions, if you are brief, dear colleagues. And of course, Madam Secretary General, you decide how long you can answer to them. We start with Bernard Fournier. Bernard Fournier de la France. Bernard, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Secrétaire Générale. Un nouveau conflit armé a opposé Israéliens et Palestiniens en mai dernier, et malgré le cessez-le-feu, aucune solution politique n'est envisagée. Israël a le statut d'observateur au sein de notre Assemblée parlementaire et une commission ad hoc devait se rendre en Palestine pour y observer les élections législatives, avant que celles-ci ne soient finalement repoussées. Dans ce contexte, que peut faire le Conseil de l'Europe pour contribuer à la relance du dialogue entre les deux parties, notamment dans le contexte de formation d'un nouveau gouvernement israélien? Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Next on my list is Samad Zeidov. Samad.
General, the trilateral statement signed on 10th November 2020 by the leaders of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia has put an end to the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, while offering the unique opportunity for sustainable peace in the region. Now it's essential for the international actors to support building confidence and normalization of relations between our two countries, based on respect for each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of internationally recognized bodies. In this respect, Madam Secretary General, I would like to know what actions of the Council of Europe can take to promote reconciliation between its two member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on my list is Madam Tatevik Harapetian. Tatevik, you have the floor. Are you?
Madam Secretary General, it has been almost 8 months and Azerbaijan continues to ignore international calls to release all prisoners of war of Armenia and returns this humanitarian issue into means for political bargaining and manipulation. Moreover, Azerbaijan has started a process of false and discriminatory trials against Armenian POs in violation of international norms and principles, particularly the 4th Geneva Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights. What tools does the Council process to assist the Convention system to react properly with regard to these false criminal cases and to contribute to the return of dozens of captives still held in Azerbaijan? Thank you.
Thank you. Ahora tenemos a Antonio Gutiérrez. Antonio, tiene la palabra.
Gracias, presidente, señora secretaria general. ¿Qué acciones cree usted que debe de implementar la Asamblea Parlamentaria del Consejo de Europa para garantizar los derechos de menores migrantes en las fronteras de Europa, para que no se produzcan las situaciones de desamparo como el vivido en Ceuta por la falta de colaboración de Estados como el de Marruecos? Y por otro lado, ¿qué acciones cree usted que puede llevar a cabo la Asamblea Parlamentaria para implementar eso que llamamos las políticas de vecindad, la vecindad geográfica, por ejemplo, con el Mediterráneo, o la vecindad de valores compartidos, como por ejemplo es el caso de Iberoamérica? Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Last on my list, which will be concluded, is Ms. Tamar Taliashvili. Tamar, you have the floor.
Dear Madam Secretary General, thank you for your last consolidated report on conflict in Georgia. Sorry?
You can go on. You can go on. That was the other one.
So I was thanking you for your last consolidated report on conflict in Georgia, as it duly reflects the destructive steps of Russia and its occupation regimes. We highly value your strong determination to keep the issue of human rights in the occupied territories of Georgia in your political agenda. Unfortunately, in the occupied regions of Georgia, shared principles and commitments of the Council of Europe are not applied. We continue witnessing Russia's grave violations of the basic human rights. Killings, illegal detentions, as in Zaza Gacheladze's alarming case, who has been kidnapped and sentenced for 12 years in prison. My question is regarding the issue of the presence of international security and human rights mechanisms on the ground. How can the Council of Europe act to ensure that fundamental human rights are respected and protected in the conflict-affected areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. You have the floor, Madam.
Yeah. Alors, pour la première question qui concerne le conflit perpétuel, je dirais, Israël et la Palestine, comme vous le savez bien, Israël n'est pas membre du Conseil de l'Europe. Il a un statut auprès de l'Assemblée parlementaire. Donc, on ne peut pas parler de la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme qui doivent être suivies par un État qui ne fait pas partie de cette convention. Donc, ce que nous avons fait, mais pas pour l'instant, c'était des mesures qui ont été prises dans le contexte des projets, dans ce qu'on appelait la politique de voisinage pour ce qui est le Moyen-Orient. Et là, on avait certains projets, surtout en Palestine, mais qui, au fur et à mesure, se sont terminés. Et j'espère bien que le comité de ministres va revoir, selon les décisions du comité de ministres de Hambourg, la politique de voisinage. J'ai déjà fait certaines propositions en la matière au comité des ministres et j'espère que d'ici fin d'année, le comité va d'abord discuter et après prendre certaines décisions là-dessus et que notre action va être de nouveau menée en ce qui concerne ces deux pays, en particulier c'est en ce qui concerne la Palestine. Ceci étant dit, je crois qu'à part que la délégation dont vous faites la référence, sur laquelle vous faites la référence, il va y aller parler aux deux côtés. Du côté du Conseil de l'Europe, je ne vois pas qu'on peut faire puisque on n'est pas l'ONU, on n'est pas dans le domaine de la sécurité. Donc, à part d'aider dans de mener certains projets, comme par exemple la protection des femmes de la violence ou autres programmes qui étaient plutôt de point de vue de bonne gouvernance, on ne peut pas faire grand-chose pour ces deux pays. Mais tout en disant cela, je trouve qu'il est important que le Conseil de l'Europe, par biais de sa politique de voisinage, soit présent au Moyen-Orient et notamment dans les deux pays que vous mentionnez. In what is the question, actually two questions related to Armenia, Azerbaijan. Let me first say that I've been calling since the last summer outbreak of the hostilities between the two countries for stopping the humanitarian catastrophe that was visibly going to happen. Unfortunately, the war was there, and the consequences are very heavy and very difficult. And as always, the consequences then take much, much longer to be erased and to be remedied, and the confidence to be rebuilt among the society. So what the Council of Europe can do there, of course, we support the work for longer-term work for finding a long-standing, sustainable solution for the area, but that pertains to the Minsk group parties. So we firmly support this work and hope that the solutions will be found. But in the meantime, what we as the Council of Europe can do, and I think I already announced in the Parliamentary Assembly, is that we can do what we do in these areas which are affected by the conflict, is confidence-building measures. So immediately, when it was possible, after the ceasefire agreement that I hope that will be withheld by both parties, I sent the high-level group to visit both Baku and Yerevan, and now we are at the final stage of devising confidence-building measures which will encompass non-political issues and try to build confidence in the very difficult environment, which is the post-conflict environment between the two countries. Now, when it comes to detainees, I can only say that I welcome recent exchange of several detainees and maps of mines. Coming from the region which had a conflict in the past, map mines, and you probably know from other conflicts that date from long ago, are those that remain there unless they are properly searched and properly identified for more than 50 years, if no longer, and can affect lives very often of children and innocent people who are there. So although at this moment I think everyone is mostly concerned about detainees and people who are in captivity, I think one shouldn't forget about the importance of getting mine maps and eradicating mines from the areas, because that will certainly not be proper environment for returning people and having a decent and proper life there. So I can only welcome the recent situation where this did happen, and from my side I can observe that this is probably first very visible, symbolic, but still a very important act of humanitarian and human reactions among the two, and I can only hope that in the future there will be more such courage and such engagement from both sides to find a way to overcome the situation and build confidence, which is the basis for the peace in the future. Now for the situation of minor, I hope I understood well with my Spanish, which I didn't speak for a long time. So for minor migrants, I know that there were recently in Celila, there were cases where there was quite a number of young and minor people who were there. I was following it very closely because, as you know, within the Council of Europe, we have several bodies that are following the migration issues. One is a special representative of the Secretary General for Migration. Others are, of course, our Commissioner for Human Rights and our CPT organ. So all of them are following very closely. Now, when it comes to unaccompanied minors, I must say that as a result, as a first action plan in regard with the migration issues, the theme of this major theme of this first action plan was related to unaccompanied minors. So how to assist our member states that are in particularly exposed to migrations, how to deal with the minors in general, minors, asylum seekers, and minor migrants. This and there is a lot of good practice that was established there, including one network of focal points for migration that helps member states exchange good practices, but also exchange information about it. And if I can say something when looking at the migration, if there is one positive result, I think that is that some of our member states when there are urgent situations, react as in emergency in a way that they relocate or some of the minor migrants that are in such situations. So I can only ask for member states who can do so to really show a humanitarian side of that every one of us have to save these children from all the precarity that they can face when they are in this situation. And for your second question is a big theme, but just mentioning for the neighboring policy for the for the Council of Europe. I have already proposed because the neighboring policy that we have so far now is more or less at its review. I have made some proposals to the Committee of Ministers. They will discuss it, they will think about it, and we will see how to go in the future about that. In my view, the basic orientations that were established and some of the criteria known as Istanbul criteria are still valid, so that we work with 555 formula, 5 countries of East from South Mediterranean, 5 countries of the Middle East, and 5 countries of the Central Asia. So this geographical scope to me seems appropriate. However, in working with these countries with different levels, we discovered that probably some more adjustment needs to be done in the policy that we have devised before. So I hope that the Committee of Ministers and its working bodies will in the future work on that and see how our neighboring policy having the same goal to expand the good governance and the area of freedom through human rights, democracy and the rule of law through our neighborhood can best help these citizens of these countries that are targeted by our neighboring policies. So I'm sure and I know that within the Parliamentary Assembly, you also are very concerned about that. I know that you often refer to that. And let me say as a final word, this time we call for more and more, and this was also one of the tasks given by the decision of the Committee of Ministers held in Hamburg last month, is to link more visibly sustainable development goals with our neighboring policy. So my call in the proposal that I made is that we make a lot of good work. I refer to it through the annual report of our monitoring and advisory bodies. And their work can be really an excellent benchmarks for SDGs for member states, because as you may know, SDGs mainly are implemented at the national level, but our expertise can be very helpful, and we also try on the level of Council of Europe to use more and more linking our work to SDGs, including that we have a dedicated part of our webpage that is serving for that purpose.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary General. I think that concludes our Q&A with you. We would love to go on for a couple of hours, but I suppose you don't really have the time and we need to work on some reports. So thank you very much, as always, for your responses to the Parliamentary Assembly, and I also wish to thank you for the excellent cooperation that we have. May I invite now Vice Chair Kimmo Kiljunen to take over the meeting. Of course, you got your hammer, but you stay away from my bell, right? Voila. Kimmo.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the next item, and I try to do my best with this hammer, which the President kindly offered to me, I suppose it's not very much needed. We are very orderly running the discussions. Obviously, you all know very well that during the annual progress report, the overall theme for all of us was the pandemic, COVID pandemic. It has had a big impact for the organization, obviously, also in our work, and also, of course, throughout Europe. It's a serious challenge for all the societies. Now we do have an actually item to discuss seriously about the issue of the COVID pandemic, and we have a report. The title is the following: Overcoming the Socio-economic Crisis Sparked by the COVID-19 Pandemic. That report will be presented by Mr. Andrei Hunko. He will speak on behalf of the Committee of Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. We shall also hear an opinion from Mrs. Elvira Kovacs. She will speak on behalf of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. The debate time, according to the original plan, was so that we try to finish this debate by 6:30. I suppose we are strict still to that one, although we start almost half an hour later as planned, but we try to be strict on that one. So unfortunately, I have to finish the list of speakers around 1 hour from this time, and in order to have a lot of times for replies and obviously on the vote. The rapporteur has 7 minutes, as usual, to present the report, and 3 minutes afterwards. And the overall debate time is for everyone 3 minutes. I try to be strict on that one because we need obviously have so many speeches as presentation as possible. Now, Mr. Hunko, the floor is yours, please.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir diskutieren heute über den Bericht zur Überwindung der sozioökonomischen Krise, die durch Covid-19 ausgelöst wurde. Es ist ja eine tiefe Wirtschaftskrise ausgelöst worden, die auch dadurch verstärkt worden ist, dass viele Staaten auf die Pandemie nicht gut vorbereitet waren. Und wenn man sich mal anschaut, wie die Auswirkungen dieser Wirtschaftskrise waren auf die unterschiedlichen Teile unserer Gesellschaften, so muss man sagen, dass die Auswirkungen sehr, sehr ungleich verteilt waren. Während die Pandemie ja alle irgendwo trifft, sind die Folgen der Wirtschaftskrise sehr, sehr ungleich verteilt. Nach Einschätzungen zum Beispiel des Internationalen Währungsfonds geht man davon aus, dass alleine im Jahre 2020 die Anzahl der Menschen in extremer Armut um zusätzlich 100 Millionen weltweit gestiegen ist, dass die Armut und die Unterernährung von Kindern sich verdoppelt hat. Und das alles führt dazu, dass auch NGOs wie Oxfam von einer Hungerpandemie sprechen. Das betrifft eben auch große Teile der Welt. Auf der anderen Seite ist vielleicht überraschend, aber der Anteil der Dollarmillionäre um 5,6 Millionen gestiegen. Das Vermögen der 2700 Milliardäre ist um 60% innerhalb dieser Pandemie gestiegen. Das zeigt halt, wie außerordentlich die ungleiche Entwicklung ist. Ich habe schon gesagt, dass die Pandemie viele Staaten unvorbereitet getroffen hat. Das hat auch damit zu tun, dass im Vorfeld auch falsche Reaktionen eingesetzt wurden auf die letzte große Wirtschaftskrise, die wir vor 10 Jahren hatten, der sogenannten Finanzmarktkrise und späteren Euro-Krise. Und da sind ja auch viele Austeritätsprogramme gemacht worden, die dann wiederum die Reaktionsfähigkeit im Gesundheitssystem in einigen Staaten geschwächt haben. All das kommt hier zusammen. Und es war ja so, dass letztes Jahr im März, im April viele Staaten entsprechend ihrer Möglichkeiten mit großen Investitionsprogrammen erstmal reagiert haben, um die Wirtschaft zu stabilisieren. Das ist sehr unterschiedlich auch verteilt gewesen, weil auch die Spielräume der Staaten unterschiedlich sind und dass auch jetzt zumindest auf Ebene der Europäischen Union ein großes Investitionsprogramm aufgelegt worden ist, das aus meiner Sicht in die richtige Richtung geht. Es könnte meines Erachtens noch größer sein. Und wir sehen schon, dass gegenwärtig ein anderes internationales Klima herrscht als vor 10 Jahren, als sozusagen die Austeritätspolitik im Mittelpunkt stand als Reaktion auf die Krise. So ist es jetzt schon so, dass viele internationale Akteure wie die OECD, aber sogar der US-amerikanische Präsident ganz andere Paradigmen hier vorschlagen. Zum Beispiel sagt die Chefvolkswirtin der OECD, Laurence Boom, ich zitiere, die wirtschaftlichen Auswirkungen der Coronavirus-Pandemie sollten die Einstellungen der Regierungen zu öffentlichen Ausgaben und Schulden verändern. Eine erneute Austerität würde eine Gegenreaktion der Bevölkerung riskieren. Der Fehler, den wir gemacht haben, war nicht ein Mangel an wirtschaftlicher Stimulierung während der Talsohle im Jahr 2009. Der Fehler kam später im Jahre 2010, 2011 und so weiter. Die erste Lektion ist sicherzustellen, dass die Regierungen in den 1 bis 2 Jahren nach dem Tiefpunkt des Bruttoinlandsprodukts keine Sparmaßnahmen durchführen, keine Austerität durchführen. Die Länder sollten sich von kurzfristigen numerischen Zielen für öffentliche Defizite und Schulden verabschieden und stattdessen langfristige Nachhaltigkeitsziele verfolgen. Und das ist auch im Kern, was ich vorschlage in diesem Bericht. Ich denke, wir brauchen große öffentliche Investitionsprogramme, die sich orientieren an den UN-Nachhaltigkeitszielen, an diesen 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Also da geht es um Kampf gegen Armut, um Kampf gegen Ungleichheit, aber auch um Ziele wie den Kampf gegen den Klimawandel. Und dass es natürlich notwendig ist, ebenso, das habe ich auch noch mal in dem Bericht gemacht, dass wir gleichzeitig auch die Impfstoffproduktion international vorantreiben, unter anderem durch Aufhebung auch der Patente. Es kommt natürlich immer die Frage, wie kann das Ganze finanziert werden? Ich glaube, es ist wichtig, dass hier auch die Profiteure der jetzigen Krise mit herangezogen werden. Und deswegen habe ich hier eine Reihe von Vorschlägen gemacht. Ich glaube, wir stehen wirklich an einem historischen Scheideweg. Es ist ja auch, eine Krise beinhaltet ja auch immer eine Chance einerseits die Wirtschaft neu zu gestalten, neu aufzubauen. Und ich glaube, diese Chance sollten wir ergreifen. Also öffentliche Investitionsprogramme in großem Maßstab, um vor allen Dingen die UN-Nachhaltigkeitsziele umzusetzen. Das ist im Kern im Grunde genommen der Vorschlag, den ich hier mache. Und ich bitte um Unterstützung für diesen Bericht und freue mich auf auch kritische Beiträge. Vielen Dank.
Mr. Honko, thank you very much indeed. And now I would like to ask Mrs. Kovacs. She is giving the opinion of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination on these issues. Please, Mrs. Kovacs.
Distinguished Chair, dear colleagues. First of all, of course, I wish to congratulate Andrej Hunko for this report. It draws attention to the socio-economic dimension of the crisis induced by the COVID-19 pandemic and points out that its effects have been aggravated due to structural weaknesses that already existed within our societies. The Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination welcomes the recognition that inclusive and sustainable development must be at the heart of all recovery efforts, that we cannot talk about socio-economic recovery without paying attention to the needs of the disadvantaged and marginalized, and without COVID-19 responses grounded in data, evidence, and human rights. However, committee wishes the text to reflect more strongly the principles of equality and non-discrimination, which are crucial to our society's sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Therefore, the amendments proposed are aimed at mainstreaming into all equality into all measures taken to respond to the socio-economic crisis, and especially to incorporate equality impact assessments as an integral element of ongoing public health, economic and social policy responses to the crisis, aimed at identifying and eliminating the actual or potential discriminatory effects of these responses. Ensure equal opportunities by eliminating discriminatory laws, policies, and practices as part of the Sustainable Development Goals and the pledge to leave no one behind. Mounting evidence has shown that ethnic, racial, and religious minorities are not only at greater risk of contracting the virus for a wide range of reasons, but can also face higher mortality rates once infected, often due to limited access to medical care. Linguistic minorities may face problems in accessing accurate public health service advice. The pandemic is still far from over, unfortunately, and its discriminatory effects continue to deepen inequalities. Lockdowns increase the risk of domestic and gender-based violence. The gender pay and pension gaps are widening. Unequal health status and living conditions continue to expose some groups to greater risk of illness. Educational and professional opportunities for the young remain blocked. Both young people and the elderly face persisting isolation. Financial support has been diverted away from programs designed to combat inequalities, and access to vaccination is also uneven. States now face a dual challenge. They must not only continue to fight the pandemic and its effects, they also must look urgently to building a fairer, more inclusive future throughout society and across all levels of people's lives, going well beyond socio-economic concerns. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Kovacs. Now we move actually to the speakers list, and as usual, we start with the speakers on behalf of the political groups. And now we start with the United Left of Europe. George Katrogalos, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate Andrei Hunko for a very impressive report. And I must say that generally, our Assembly has showed good reflexes in this challenging environment of the pandemics. Already in the morning, we have responded to challenges related to freedoms and civil rights in order to avoid a hygienic apartheid. But as already indicated by both our rapporteurs, the situation at the social level is even more worrying. Oxfam has called the COVID virus the inequality virus for the reasons already exposed. And not only regarding the global south, Andrei Hunko has referred to numbers that for the first time in the last decades, we have a rise of absolute poverty in the world. And some estimates, like those of the United Nations Global Institute of Development, estimate that this rise of absolute poverty could reach 500 million people. That is 8% of the global population. And at the same time, the accumulated wealth of the 10 biggest billionaires, the accumulated wealth during the crisis, is enough, according again to Oxfam, to finance all the vaccination needed to the poor countries and also to reverse this trend of increasing absolute poverty. Moreover, this is not a concern only for the global south, but also for our own societies. The example of undermining of the national health systems, referred again by the two rapporteurs, is very characteristic. There are countries in Europe that they have lost between the 80s and nowadays more than 40% of their general and acute beds. And this is now general knowledge. If you read, for instance, the novel of Jonathan Coe, Middle England, you understand better how this emblematic British national health system has become a shadow of itself because of decades of austerity and underfunding. So now it is the case to reverse this example of development, exactly because the pandemics has exacerbated, did not create the inequalities. And I think the report shows how we should proceed. First of all, reinforce the fiscal capacity of the state. Between the 80s and now, the average corporate tax has been reduced almost by 50%. So we must tax the richer, especially the multinationals who escaped now to tax havens. We must increase social investment in public infrastructure, especially in the welfare state. And more generally, rebalance growth, reorient growth, not just to augmenting the national GDP, but also helping people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we move to the group of Socialist, Social Democrats and Greens. Mrs. Selin Seyik-Bök from Turkey will actually address. I will now say also the next one in order to make it more swiftly the moves. After her, there will be Mr. François Calvet for the group EPP. But now, Mrs. Selin Seyik-Bök.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Junco on behalf of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group. The pandemic started as a health crisis, evolving very quickly into a deep socioeconomic crisis. It has brought the socioeconomic inequalities into the limelight and brought the world to the same critical juncture we faced earlier. Will we insist on our current socioeconomic model that has been generating these ever-deepening inequalities, or will we this time opt to change our model? Clearly, this question implies a historic opportunity as well as a huge responsibility. We bear the opportunity of righting the austerity wrongs of the past and the responsibility of ameliorating the vulnerability of the millions. Now, these socioeconomic inequalities we face upon the pandemic are structural. As such, any policy should not only alleviate the short-term pain inflicted by the pandemic, but should also become a stepping stone in changing our social and economic structures. First and foremost, it's time we turn words into deeds. For example, our very own European Social Charter stipulates that the state ensures every individual is guaranteed a basic level of income. However, even though a basic level of income is enshrined as a right in our conventions and legislations, as the reality of the pandemic has shown to us, millions lack this minimum level of income. So I underline, under a pandemic that has meant economic distress, mostly to the precarious and the vulnerable, it's the responsibility of the state to provide social protection and support, not to push people into more debt from financial markets. And this is indeed very well identified in this resolution. For example, the right to protection of health is under protection via our European Social Charter. In other words, health is a social right enshrined in our very own convention. Putting these words into deed would require that states expand their public social investment programs to ensure universal health care. This will not only mean dealing with the pandemic, but it will also mean that rather than commodifying healthcare in the hands of private sector, who seeks private profits naturally, the states will provide healthcare to all as a public service. In short, to put our words to deeds, to make social and economic rights our socioeconomic realities, we need to avoid austerity. We need to revisit our fiscal discipline frameworks, where we focus on the composition and the quality of our spending, where we focus on social public investment and infrastructure programs which aim social justice. And this would require that states undertake efficient social public investment rather than rent-seeking infrastructure projects that serve huge wealth transfers into the hands of a few. And indeed, social justice requires fiscal justice, and fiscal justice necessitates progressive taxation. We can turn words into deeds by accepting this resolution, and this will be a step in the right direction. On behalf of our group, I strongly support this report and congratulate the rapporteur.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Céline Saïk-Böke. Next one is François Calvet for the group EPP, and after him there will be ALDE group represented by Reina de Bruin-Wiesman from Netherlands. Now, please.
Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues, je remercie nos collègues Andrei Hunko et Elvira Kovacs qui nous permettent d'aborder les enjeux socio-économiques de la crise de la Covid-19. La pandémie de la Covid-19 a mis à mal nos économies et nos sociétés. Nos États ont mis en place des dispositifs d'urgence pour atténuer les effets de la crise à très court terme. L'enjeu aujourd'hui, c'est de préparer le retour à la normale. Notre rapporteur nous propose une vision très ambitieuse et d'une certaine manière maximaliste sur le plan budgétaire. Intervenant au nom du groupe PPE, je voudrais vous faire part de quelques réflexions qui s'appuient notamment sur des échanges que les commissions des affaires européennes ont eus la semaine dernière en format Weimar. La proposition de résolution évoque la possibilité de revoir les exigences fiscales du pacte de stabilité et de croissance conformément au besoin de maintenir les dépenses au moins pendant la période de reprise. L'Union européenne a adopté, après de longues négociations, un plan de relance adossé à un emprunt commun qui vient d'entrer dans une phase opérationnelle. L'enjeu est désormais d'agir vite. Le plan européen est-il suffisant? Sincèrement, je pense qu'il faut le prendre tel qu'il est. Nous avons eu beaucoup de mal à aboutir à un accord au Conseil européen. Je ne crois pas à un plan européen complémentaire. En revanche, et la résolution de notre collègue l'exprime, nous voyons la tentation de contourner l'obstacle par un débat légitime sur les règles budgétaires européennes. Doit-on s'accrocher aujourd'hui aux fameux critères de Maastricht ou faut-il les assouplir pour permettre aux États d'investir plus dans des domaines stratégiques pour l'avenir afin que l'Europe ne soit pas irrémédiablement distancée par ses concurrents, au premier rang desquels les États-Unis et la Chine. Ce débat, je vois bien que le gouvernement français souhaite le porter, notamment dans la perspective de la présidence française du Conseil au premier semestre 2022. C'est un débat qui ne peut, à mon sens, être mené qu'en étant accompagné d'une doctrine budgétaire crédible et d'engagement sincère en matière de choix et de maîtrise des dépenses publiques. On ne pourra pas faire fi durablement des contraintes budgétaires. En France, la Banque de France et la Cour des comptes nous l'ont rappelé récemment. Et je vois qu'en Allemagne, le débat aussi court en vue des prochaines élections. En revanche, je partage l'analyse de nos rapporteurs sur la nécessité d'une approche inclusive de la croissance. L'histoire nous a montré que les périodes d'immédiate après-crise ont souvent débouché sur des difficultés sociales, mais aussi ensuite sur des crises politiques et des enjeux démocratiques. C'est à cette aune que nous devons, me semble-t-il, aborder ces questions. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Next one is Mrs. Reina de Bruin-Wiesman for the ALDE group, and after her, John Howell will prepare.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the ALDE, I want to congratulate the rapporteur, Mr. Andrei Huko, on his report in which he sets out the socio-economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. Every state is confronted with the consequences of the measures taken to control the pandemic, which had an enormous impact on social life and slowed down economic developments. Unfortunately, we also experience that vulnerable parts of the population and region across Europe are disproportionately affected in sanitary, social, and economic terms. The ALDE welcomes the recommendations in this report on ensuring that funds made available to stabilize and strengthen the socio-economic situation are used to promote more inclusive and more sustainable development. For an inclusive and more sustainable development, the rapporteur emphasizes member states' commitment to upholding fundamental social rights and as enshrined in the European Social Charter. To achieve these goals, expansion of public investment programs is recommended. I find the recommendation of revisiting the fiscal requirements of the EU Stability and Growth Pact in line with the need to maintain spending at least during the recovery period very interesting. There must be room for that. Some leading economists in the Netherlands note that when there is a quick recovery with renewed economic growth, with current low interest rates, some of the state's debt burden will evaporate on its own. Coming up to the quick recovery, it is undeniable that some of the wealthiest countries are seeing a significant improvement in their epidemiological situation, thanks to massive vaccination. Also, these countries already show quick economic recovery. Vaccination seems to be the only way out of this crisis. I therefore welcome the addendum and the proposed amendment to insert a new subparagraph 8.2.7 that calls on the urgently expand production capacity of the COVID-19 vaccines worldwide. The Director General of the WHO, Mr. Tedros Adhanom, said that to truly end the pandemic, our goal should be that at least 70% of the worldwide population should be vaccinated. To reach this goal, in my opinion, it's not only an issue of availability of vaccines, but also an issue of willingness of people to be vaccinated. And there is still more work to be done. And some groups, varying by country or region, do not want to be vaccinated because of fear or out of conviction. So I would urge all my colleagues to actively promote and stimulate mandatory vaccinations in their home countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And next one is John Howell, representing EC Group, and then after him we go to Mr. Pierre-Alain Fredette. So John Howell, please.
I can agree with the rapporteur on a number of points. And let me start by one of those, and that is that in the UK, we are actively considering the experience and circumstances of people right across society. There's no doubt that we will all be changed by the experience of COVID, and we can ensure that we emerge stronger and more united as a result. And in the UK, the government is committed to levelling up and making the UK a country where equality of opportunity exists for everyone. And we are committed to ensuring a fair recovery for all. This paper calls for large sums of money to be spent on COVID recovery, an ambitious investment programme, a guaranteed minimum income, for example. All of this is to be paid for, by, amongst other things, by progressive taxation. It will probably come as no surprise to say that I disagree with much of this. I come from a conservative background, and I accept that the rapporteur comes from a background on the left. I think that it ignores the experience of countries like the UK, where the emphasis on growth is seeing a springing back quicker than was originally envisaged. And the use of funds to preserve jobs and to help businesses has ensured that demand is just waiting to be released. During this crisis, we have rolled out unprecedented levels of support to protect jobs for both women and for men. I do not believe that providing enterprises with public funds is supportable or sustainable. And in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors, all strong employers of women and ethnic minorities, eligible businesses will continue to pay no rates, no taxes, local taxes on their properties for 12 months, saving them £10 billion. but that is not sustainable. As I read it, this report recommends effectively the nationalization of key areas. I do not believe that this will work. I do not believe that it is in the interests of the consumer. It is a shame that we are going back over arguments that I remember having back in the 1970s. There is a quote at the end of it of a future that we want. I think the rapporteur asked for a future that we want. I agree with that. It's just that I think that we have a different way of approaching that future rather than a different future that we actually want to achieve. But I think the way that we approach that is crucial to understanding how best we achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And now we move to Mr. Pierre-Alain Fridet. The following one is Mrs. Juhas Hainalka. Now I would like to say you that unfortunately speakers list is quite long. We have 30 speakers on the list. Unfortunately, I can easily see that roughly having the time schedule now in front of us, I cannot take maybe more than around 10. So please try to be as swift as possible in your presentation, then you allow others to make the presentation. Now we move to the next speaker, please. Pierre,
Monsieur le Vice-président, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues, l'histoire nous l'a appris, de tout temps, les pandémies, en plus de morts en masse et de la peur, ont été porteuses de chaos, de troubles sociaux, souvent de bouleversements politiques, voire de révolutions, et toujours de désorganisation socio-économique. Donc comment s'étonner dès lors des importantes répercussions de la Covid-19 sur nos existences depuis un peu plus d'une année. Sans vaccin, on en aurait eu pour plusieurs années des vagues successives et la tension sociale, voire le chaos à la clé. Heureusement, grâce à l'intelligence des hommes, aux prouesses de la technologie, les vaccins à ARN messager offrent une réponse médicale à ce cataclysme. Et notre horizon et le champ de nos possibles peuvent enfin s'éclaircir. Mais il y aura un avant et un après Covid-19. Le filet social de la plupart de nos pays a tenu, plus ou moins bien selon les pays. Il a permis de réaliser des mesures de confinement, la réponse la plus pertinente dans l'urgence pour ralentir, contenir la propagation du virus, pour autant que les moyens financiers de nos États le permettent, et ça n'a pas été le cas partout. Les pays ont creusé leur endettement, mais cette pandémie a démontré l'importance de disposer d'un État social fort. N'en déplaise aux fervents défenseurs du libéralisme roi, le besoin d'État fort, d'un État social fort et protecteur est de retour, l'État-providence. Il est l'heure maintenant de se relever et de tirer les leçons de l'épreuve que nous venons de traverser. Et cela passe par des réponses claires, efficaces et adaptées qu'on retrouve dans le rapport de notre collègue. Premièrement, renforcer notre État social, comme je l'ai dit avant, cela reste aujourd'hui plus que jamais une priorité. Ne laisser personne au bord du chemin, lutter sans relâche contre la pauvreté qui s'est développée. Maintenir, développer, si c'est nécessaire, des services de santé à la hauteur. Ce n'est pas simple dans le contexte de l'endettement que connaissent plusieurs de nos pays et du ralentissement économique. Mais nous devons fixer des priorités. Réduire, par exemple, la course aux armements, renforcer la justice fiscale, imposer des impôts de solidarité que l'on demanderait aux plus riches. Et pourquoi pas reparler d'un revenu universel. Ensuite, il y a la relance économique. Il faut mettre les moyens. Lors d'une audition récente dans la Commission des affaires sociales, au sujet d'un rapport que je fais sur la pauvreté extrême des enfants, quelqu'un des États-Unis disait à quel point les moyens mis par l'administration américaine pour soutenir les familles et les enfants a permis de diminuer la pauvreté et de relancer l'économie. Il faut soutenir mieux les plus pauvres, il faut soutenir l'emploi, développer la technologie. Et il faut surtout mettre beaucoup de moyens pour la transition écologique. Il faut investir utilement, notamment dans l'isolement des bâtiments. La pandémie reste un risque. Je vais me taire gentiment. Cela reste un risque et il faut véritablement vacciner l'ensemble de la société, l'ensemble du monde. Autrement, l'effet boomerang arrivera pour l'Europe. Désolé et bravo, Monsieur Hunko.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Now, is it Mrs. Heinalka Juhas? You are the next one, and after you, Mrs. Konul Nuralieva. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The present report sets out concrete proposals for Member States to elaborate and implement ambitious economic recovery measures with a view to ensure a solid basis for their economies to grow, as well as to enable the society as a whole to benefit. Against this backdrop, in accordance with these requirements, our government is at the doorstep of initiating a relaunch programme. Following the shocking waves of COVID-19, we have now come to the turning point. This milestone is called the economic and social recovery. Another key aspect is that we should find balance between boosting economic recovery and avoiding adverse social implications, with a view to find a forward-looking consistency between the two. We should avoid applying a tax-centered economic and financial approach, and instead we should empower corporate actors and individuals, in the case of latter both in the terms of their status and consumer or beneficiaries of social allowances. The rapporteur has a very important suggestion, is the job creation, which the Hungarian government also very committed. The government of Hungary adequately realized that public sanitary measures and policies aimed at protecting the economy must go hand in hand. That is to say, a balance must be struck between the efforts to save lives and to keep the country functioning. The burden of the crisis should not be put on the shoulders of those who suffered the most, citizens and businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises. Restrictive monetary and fiscal models should be also eliminated. Consequently, a wide-ranging and exclusive consultation process should be initiated to get people on the right track towards an effective and successful recovery of both public health and the economy. Congratulate the rapporteur. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Now we move to Azerbaijan, Mrs. Konul Nuralieva, and after her, Mr. Jacques Ledin. Mrs. Konul Nuralieva, пожалуйста.
Thank you, Honorable President, dear Mrs. Elvira and Mr. Andres. Thank you for providing insightful inputs on this global concern. It's unfortunate but undeniable that COVID-19 has deeply impacted people's lives from various aspects and raised severe health-related, social, economic, and fiscal challenges for all countries. I would like to draw your attention particularly to the effect of COVID-19 on socio-economic matters and state the solutions we can use to mitigate the aggravated crisis. Firstly, as the scale of the socio-economic crisis is not equal across all countries or within the population, we need to treat the groups most vulnerable to inequalities or having the least access to resources. For example, as 2021 is post-war period for Azerbaijan, an important share of annual goals were concentrated on disadvantaged groups such as families of martyrs, war veterans, and single households who lost the head of their families during the liberation of occupied lands. To these groups, Azerbaijan state dedicated a separate support plan which encompasses further expansion of social support measures, ensuring the sustainability of social payments, construction of social infrastructure in the liberated territories, and social programs including housing, car, and self-employment. Moreover, I am of the opinion that all countries need to analyze the employment losses recorded within their national borders as a result of the pandemic to realize what labor groups and which sectors of work were affected by COVID-19 the most and where the government's efforts to revitalize the economy should be concentrated on. In this regard, the state of Azerbaijan designed financial support programs for employees working in the sectors immensely affected by pandemic, such as trade, transport, industry, and services, and of course the businesses operating in the areas endangered by pandemic. I believe that to overcome the socio-economic crisis, every state needs to combat it first on national, but later also on global level by distributing financial aid to states with the worst defense system against the crisis. Finally, I join my fellow colleagues and advocate strategy, long-term vision, and ambition for transformative recovery on the European continent with strong green and social dimensions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And the next one is Mr. Jacques Lenné from France, and after him, Michael Melkuman.
Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues, les États membres du Conseil de l'Europe ont réagi rapidement face à la propagation de la pandémie du Covid-19 en adoptant des plans d'urgence et de soutien à l'économie. Si le soutien massif des États a permis de limiter les conséquences dramatiques de la crise socio-économique engendrée par la pandémie, il a considérablement fragilisé l'équilibre de leurs finances publiques. Ce débat est donc l'occasion pour les États de mener une réflexion approfondie et de plus long terme sur les caractéristiques des ressources dont ils disposent et l'emploi qu'ils en font. Avec un objectif clair, à mon sens, créer une croissance inclusive, durable et soutenable qui rende nos pays plus résilients. Les programmes d'urgence et de relance font appel à des ressources considérables qu'il était nécessaire de mobiliser, mais qui ont beaucoup creusé le déficit public et la dette des États, mais aussi de l'Union européenne, autorisée pour la première fois à s'endetter pour lancer un plan de relance et de résilience de 750 milliards d'euros. Le remboursement de la dette Covid, et maintenant que la situation sanitaire semble s'améliorer, le retour à la normale budgétaire constitue des enjeux majeurs. Je partage à cet égard l'accent mis par notre rapporteur sur la nécessité de stimuler l'emploi et la création d'emplois de haute qualité, en veillant tout particulièrement au secteur stratégique pour l'avenir, notamment en matière de transition écologique et de numérique. Cette crise, pour difficile qu'elle soit, doit être l'occasion de colmater nos faiblesses. La proposition de résolution souligne à raison la nécessité d'améliorer les perspectives éducatives et professionnelles des jeunes et de développer des systèmes d'éducation et de formation tout au long de la vie. Les jeunes et les plus fragiles sur le plan social ont beaucoup souffert de cette crise et risquent malheureusement d'en souffrir encore si jamais la croissance n'est pas suffisante pour éviter des fermetures d'entreprises. Les États doivent renforcer les dispositifs qui permettront à nos concitoyens d'être plus agiles pour conserver ou retrouver un emploi et doivent veiller à maintenir des filets sociaux adaptés. Dans ce contexte et face aux moyens nécessaires, il me paraît important que les États puissent trouver, dans le cadre de l'OCDE, une solution pertinente de taxation de l'économie numérique. Je salue également l'engagement des États membres du G7 en faveur d'un taux minimal d'imposition de 15% pour l'impôt sur les sociétés, qui me paraît être un pas très important. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. And next one is Mikhail Melkuman from Armenia. Is he linked? No. Then it actually we move straight away to Mr. Stefan Schenach from Austria. And after Stefan, there is Yuri Kamelchuk. Please, Stefan.
Danke schön, Herr Präsident. Auch ich kann dem Sozialausschuss, dem Berichterstatter und auch der Berichterstatterin nur gratulieren. Dieser Bericht kommt zur genau richtigen Zeit, nämlich jetzt stellt sich die Frage, erstens, wer zahlt die Krise? Wer zahlt die Krise und wie verhüten wir eine Rezession? Das sind die zwei allerschlimmsten Dinge, die hier unter Umständen gänzlich falsch ausgehen können. Das Wichtige ist, und es hat diese Krise gezeigt, wie dramatisch sich die Lage der benachteiligten Bevölkerung in dieser Krise entwickelt hat. Gleichzeitig wurde ganz viel öffentliches Geld in die Hand genommen. Und da muss man aber jetzt ehrlich bleiben. Das wurde viel mehr in Firmen investiert, alleine in die Fluglinien zum Beispiel, als in die einzelnen Beschäftigten. Auch wenn es Kurzarbeit und Arbeitsunterstützung gab, kann es am Ende nicht so sein, dass man dann bei den Beschäftigten den Hauptteil der Finanzierung einhebt. Und was ganz, ganz schlecht wäre, wenn wir zurückfallen würden in eine Art Austeritätspolitik, also sparen, sparen und die Hebel zu drehen. Wichtig ist, und das glaube ich, müssen wir hier, und das hat auch der Berichterstatter festgehalten, wir brauchen jetzt die öffentlichen Investitionsprogramme. Wir brauchen das Investment in den Klimawandel, in den digitalen Wandel und wir müssen, und da bin an die Adresse von Herrn Calvet, ja, wir müssen die Maastricht-Kriterien als Knebelungskriterien aufheben. Wir müssen den Städten und Gemeinden, die ja hier ein ganz anderes Potenzial haben, um Nachfrage und Investitionen zu treffen, denen müssen wir aus dieser Knebelung der letzten Jahre heraushelfen, um wiederum Arbeit im lokalen Bereich zu schaffen. Und vor allem, wenn wir den ökologischen Bereich sehen, dann ist das ein Schlüsselpunkt, sich bei den Städten und Gemeinden, dass die aus diesem engen Korsett der Maastricht-Kriterien herausschlüpfen können. Und der Berichterstatter hält fest, dass auf der einen Seite die Sozialkarte schützt, aber in dieser extremen Krise haben wir auch Lücken gesehen. Das heißt, wir müssen an dieser Sozialkarte auch weiterarbeiten. Und das Wichtige ist auch jetzt die Impfsolidarität. Wir müssen hier solidarisch sein mit jenen Ländern, die sich die Impfdosen nicht leisten können. Aber wir dürfen das nicht in böse Geschäfte abtauschen. Deshalb meine volle Unterstützung für diese Resolution und Empfehlung.
Sorry, Mr. Kaminski, we have now links to Mikhail Melkiman from Armenia, so please let's take him first and then you. Is the link there? Great. So.
Je suis bien. Chers collègues, bonjour. Le Covid-19 est un sérieux défi pour tous les pays du monde. Cette catastrophe qui dure depuis près de 2 ans a ébranlé le fondement de l'économie mondiale, a porté de sérieux coups, non seulement au système de santé, aux entreprises, mais aussi un groupe vulnérable de la société, un croissant d'inégalités. La pandémie a fait apparaître de nombreux problèmes auxquels des États n'avaient pas confrontés auparavant. Et maintenant que la plupart des pays ont levé des restrictions strictes, nous devons penser non seulement à la restauration de nos économies, mais aussi à leur reconstruction afin de pouvoir relever plus efficacement le futur défi. Le projet en discussion est d'autant plus important qu'il appelait à réunir nos efforts et nos opportunités pour surmonter ensemble cette crise qui a bouleversé le cours normal de la vie. Cependant, chers collègues, il est regrettable de constater que certains États membres de notre institution font le contraire et profitent de cette situation pour réaliser leurs aspirations belliqueuses. Quel soutien peut-on attendre de l'Azerbaïdjan et de la Turquie des zones déclenchées la guerre d'Artsakh de 44 jours au temps de la pandémie, impliquée de mercenaires et utilisant des armes interdites contre la population civile arménienne? Qu'attendre l'Azerbaïdjan qui est impliqué jour sur le territoire souverain de la République arménienne? Je vous pose alors la question suivante. Comment se fait-il qu'après toutes les atrocités, ces États resteraient impunis? Depuis plus de 7 mois, depuis le 10 novembre, l'Azerbaïdjan détient pour les 200 prisonniers de guerre arménienne. Et quel siècle sommes-nous? Un tel crime dans le monde moderne dépassait toutes les normes. Est-ce qu'ils veulent voir capture de soldats azéris qui ont envahit notre territoire souverain pour ensuite échanger. Si c'est ça que vous désirez, l'Europe, ils ont envahi le territoire souverain d'un État membre du Conseil d'Europe. Que ferais-tu? Que ferais-tu? Ne retardez pas une proposition. Agissez et l'homme d'action de vous le prouver. Europe, des décisions deviennent être précisées, opérationnelles et ciblées. Vos procédures actuelles ne règlent plus de situations extrêmes, y compris les situations à la frontière arméno-azerbaïdjanaise. Changez-les rapidement, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. And now Mr. Yuri Kamelchuk from Ukraine, and after him, Mrs. Kate Osamor, please.
Dear Chairman, dear colleagues, Corona crisis has demonstrated humanity's unpreparedness for joint and coordinated countering of threats. China, India, Brazil, USA, EU, UK, Japan will still play a crucial role in global recovery. They own the world's major capitals. Their economic policy is the basis for many governments and central banks, and their decisions shaping global financial trends. Given the consequences of the financial crisis and inter-crisis dynamics, there is reason to believe that in the post-coronavirus period, growth rates in developed European countries will remain low compared to the growth of many emerging European and Asian economies. Expensive measures to support social programs in Europe are traditionally much broader than in the United States. For emerging countries, the difficulties of recovery are associated with falling global demand for most commodities. Leading countries have begun to introduce structural changes that have become necessary components of the formation of a new economic structure for both national and global markets. It is about productivity, the focus of which has weakened somewhat in the past 2 decades, a period of overwhelming expansion of international trade and investment flows. However, the long-term prospects for maintaining high productivity and economic dynamism depend on investment in human capital, especially in education and science. The level of funding for research and development in the EU remains at 2% of GDP, far behind the United States, Japan, and already China. Only some EU countries which have strong enough finances, Germany and Sweden, invest more. In my opinion, investment in human capital can become the main factor in the growth of the world economy in the coming decades. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now it is Mrs. Kate Osamor from United Kingdom. After her, it's Mrs. Parvin Karimitsada, Azerbaijan, and the last one, unfortunately, today is Mrs. Fiona Olukin from Ireland. Now Mrs. Kate Osamor, please.
Thank you, Chair, for calling me to speak in this debate. I would like to congratulate the Rapporteur, Andrei Honko, on his timely report. As stated in point 3 of the draft resolution, I echo the deep concerns about the situation of vulnerable population that has been harshly affected by the socio-economic crisis sparked by the pandemic. For the last 10 years, the UK government has cut welfare state to ribbons, with charities filling the gaps. Charities are the cornerstone of many communities. Sadly, across the United Kingdom, many charities struggled as a result of the lockdown just when they were needed most. As we all can attest, millions of people have lost their jobs, homes, and lives due to the pandemic, and many relied solely on charity to make ends meet. As we rebuild our economies, it is more important than ever to call for member states to provide financial support to the charity sector. During the pandemic, we saw the vulnerability of people that rent their homes, especially migrant renters who have very little support, and unfortunately, even COVID-19 failed to push the UK government into action. During the first wave, the UK government put a temporary ban on evictions. This temporary ban on evictions was recently lifted despite some sections of the economy still unable to fully open. I am particularly concerned about migrants that have no recourse to public funds, faced by those who are not allowed to claim social security benefits like universal credit or statutory sick pay because of their immigration status. During the first wave, it was not clear what support, if any, would be extended to people with no recourse to public funds. One's immigration status shouldn't stop you getting help during the pandemic. Many migrants with no recourse to public fund status kept the economy going on the front line, working on the NHS, servicing the transport links that took the essential workers to and from their work, and many died. Those migrants who caught COVID were unable to financially afford to stay at home and self-isolate due to their immigration status, were not even allowed to apply for statutory sick pay or housing benefit to help pay their rent, turning to charities for food and clothes bank for help. This virus does not discriminate when it infects people. The help governments gave people should not discriminate either. In closing, Chair, we cannot fight the road to recovery successfully if people are not secure and safe in their homes. This excellent report is a facilitator for members to take back to their respective governments to better consider a way of implementing a recovery plan that helps the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it is Mrs. Parvin Karimzada from Azerbaijan, and after her, Fiona Olugin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the coronavirus was a huge test for the whole world. Thousands of people lost their lives. There was social and economic crisis in the world. Continuous measures have been taken in Azerbaijan to combat the global coronavirus pandemic and eliminate its negative effects. In general, the economy received a total of about €1.5 billion from the 2020 state budget and other sources to finance measures to reduce the negative impact of the pandemic on the national economy, macroeconomic stability, employment, and business entities. During the pandemic, special attention was paid to employment issues. The work was done in the direction assist about 3 million people. People who lost their income during the pandemic received financial aids by government. The state paid tuition fees of students from socially vulnerable families. The scope of a self-employment program has been expanded. The list can go on, but because I have limited time, I will not go into details. Of course, the period of the pandemic was a difficult time for all countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Azerbaijan is not only taking measures to eliminate the pandemic. At the same time, it eliminates the negative results of the Second Karabakh War. Hundreds of houses were destroyed in cities far from military operations as a result of the launch of Armenian missiles. Those houses and destroyed properties are being restored. At the same time, restoration works are underway in the liberated territories. The region's energy supply, road transport, and economic infrastructure are also being rapidly restored. I especially want to emphasize green energy projects that are developed and aim at protecting the environment in the liberated territories. Smart city and smart village projects in the region will be implemented rapidly and with the participation of foreign companies through the application of advanced technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, however, the fact that Armenian side resists to provide maps of mined areas prevents fast restoration process. And finally, in general, I believe that all states must be mobilized together to overcome the negative effects of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we try Mrs. O'Loughlin from Fiona O'Loughlin from Ireland. Do we have connection? Unfortunately, no connection. But unfortunately, we are also in the situation that we have 20 more speakers on the speakers list, but time is not for us; it's against us, and I apologize. You do have opportunity to provide your speeches to the table office for publication in the official report, so please use that opportunity if you so wish. Unfortunately, we must now interrupt the list of speakers. Now, Mr. Hunko, would you like to say a few words as a rapporteur? 3 minutes.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Präsident. Ich werde kurz noch ein paar Worte sagen, aber mich kurz fassen. Erstmal vielen Dank für die vielen und auch doch sehr vielen auch positiven Rückmeldungen. Das hat mich wirklich sehr gefreut. Ich will einen Punkt vielleicht etwas genauer noch aufgreifen, den Punkt, den Herr Calvet und auch Frau de Bruyn-Wesemann gemacht haben, die Frage des Verhältnisses zum Stabilität- und Wachstumspakt der EU. Herr Calvet, Sie haben gesagt, naja, die EU ist ja hat sich ja da gerade auch verständigt, wie sie jetzt weiter damit umgehen sollte. Ich finde, wir als Parlamentarische Versammlung des Europarates können durchaus ambitioniertere Ziele formulieren. Erstmal sind wir nicht sozusagen nur EU, beziehen uns nicht nur auf die EU, aber wir können auch von unserer Rolle, weil wir basieren auf unseren Konventionen, auf der Menschenrechtskonvention, auf der Sozialcharta und so weiter, sind wir durchaus auch in der Lage, hier weitergehende Punkte zu formulieren. Und ich glaube, dass wir tatsächlich in dieser Debatte in einer Art historischen Umbruch sind, weil vieles auch der ökonomischen Festlegungen, die wir in den EU-Verträgen haben, spiegeln eine bestimmte Zeit wider, eine bestimmte Erfahrung, vor allen Dingen die Zeit der 90er Jahre und 2000er Jahre. Und ich glaube, dass wir jetzt mit neuen historischen Erfahrungen konfrontiert sind und dass es dann möglich sein muss, auch so manche Festlegungen neu zu diskutieren. Und ich habe mich sehr gefreut, auch über die Offenheit gerade auch der EPP und der ALDE-Fraktion in dieser Frage. Herr Howell hat gesagt, wir wollen ja nicht die Debatten der 70er Jahre wieder haben. Nein, das will ich auch nicht. Ich glaube schon. Aber ich glaube schon, dass es ein paar Bereiche gibt, die gesellschaftliche Bereiche, und dazu gehört Gesundheit, wo wir als Gesamtgesellschaft eine Verantwortung haben, wie sie konkret ausgestaltet werden muss. Das kann man ja diskutieren. Aber ich glaube, das ist ein Bereich, wo es eine gesamtgesellschaftliche, auch eine staatliche Verantwortung gibt und die man nicht sozusagen einfach dem Spiel von Angebot und Nachfrage und des Marktes überlassen kann. Wir stehen hier in der gesamten Debatte an einem historischen Scheideweg und ich fand das sehr interessant. Ich glaube, auch unsere Debatte spiegelt ein bisschen den Umbruch in dieser Frage wider. Und ich freue mich, wie gesagt, über die vielen Anregungen, viele zustimmenden Sachen und bitte um die Unterstützung dieses Berichtes. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Funko. Now, Mr. Leite Ramos, you are the chair of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. Would you like to make a presentation? If so, 3 minutes.
Monsieur le Vice-président, permettez-moi tout d'abord de féliciter, de remercier Monsieur Unko et Madame Kovac par leur contribution à ce excellent rapport. Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues, tandis que la pandémie du Covid-19 continue, nos pays préparent leur stratégie de sortie de la crise socio-économique qu'elle a déclenchée. Celle-ci est absolument unique dans les temps modernes en raison de son étendue mondiale, sa durée et sa profondeur. Elle va au-delà des secousses de la crise financière de 2008-2009 ou même celle de 1929. Les choix que vont faire nos États seront cruciaux pour la future prospérité de notre société, tout comme ils ont été essentiels pendant la pandémie qui nous hante encore. Le rapport de M. Unko nous appelle à mettre en avant une vision, une ambition stratégique à long terme en faveur d'une reprise porteuse de changement sur le continent européen avec une forte dimension verte et sociale. J'estime que cette pensée est largement partagée au sein de notre Assemblée. En tant que président de la Commission des questions sociales, de la santé et du développement durable, je dois insister sur les engagements de nos États à respecter les droits sociaux fondamentaux tels que consacrés par la Charte sociale européenne. Ceci n'est pas un luxe, mais notre engagement commun.
J'invite donc les membres de cette Assemblée à porter le message du rapport de M. Hunko et à défendre dans vos parlements respectifs la vision d'un État responsable et ambitieux. Je vous remercie toutes et tous pour vos contributions au débat et j'espère qu'il vous aura fourni les arguments à développer dans chaque contexte national. Encore une fois, merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leighton Ramos. And now we move to the area of making decisions. The committee has presented a draft resolution on the item to which 10 amendments have been tabled, as well as a draft recommendation to which 1 amendment has been tabled. I understand that the committee will propose that the Assembly that amendments 3, 5 and 7 to the draft resolution were unanimously approved by the committee should be declared as agreed by the Assembly also. Amendment 6 was also approved unanimously by the committee, but it is subject to an oral sub-amendment. It will be considered using, and then we will, of course, using the normal usual procedure. Is it that so, Mr. Leighton Ramos? Am I interpreting correctly the committee's opinion?
Tout à fait, Monsieur le Président.
Merci. Merci. Does anyone object this situation? There seems to be no objections. That means that I declare the amendments number 3, 5 and 7 to be drafted to the draft resolution has been agreed. That's very clear. We have still 7 amendments on the list. And I call now Mr. Hunko on behalf of the committee to support the amendment number 1. You have 1 minute, as we usually the usual procedure.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident. Hier geht es bei diesem Antrag auch nochmal darum, dass es notwendig ist, die Impfstoffproduktion auszuweiten und dass es auch wünschenswert wäre, dass wir europäische Länder auch einen Teil unserer Impfdosen abgeben, weil die Pandemie ja nur dann beendet ist, wenn letztlich die ganze Welt geschützt ist. Und es geht auch darum, was diese Versammlung schon mal gefordert hat, dass man auch die Patente zeitweise aussetzt. Den Änderungsantrag habe ich selbst noch mal mit eingebracht aufgrund der aktuellen Notwendigkeit und bitte hier um Unterstützung.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I do not see anyone. What is the opinion of the committee?
Avec une large majorité.
Now I shall put the amendment to the vote, and we are using normal systems. The vote is open. The vote is closed, and the result it's approved with clear majority. Now we move to the amendment number 4, and I call Mrs. Kovas to support amendment 4, please. You have 1 minute.
Distinguished Chair, we suggested adding some paragraph and add paragraph since we strongly believe that equality impact assessments enable states to anticipate and eliminate the discriminatory effects of their policy responses, including unintended or unforeseen effects, ensuring that discriminatory laws, policies, practices, and inequalities do not hinder life-saving tools from reaching all really who need them, requires in all our member states strong health systems, as we could hear, and inclusive governance built on trust. Thank you.
Will support. Does anyone wish to be against the amendment? Seems to be no. Is that true? Also the. Okay, the committee opinion.
Majorité.
Clear. Now I should put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. Vote is closed, and the result clearly approved. Now we move to the amendment number 6, and we'll soon see how the bureaucracy is complicated, but let's try to do that one. This is the most complicated, I think so. I call Mrs. Kovas on behalf of the committee to support the amendment number 6, please.
Thank you. It's not so complicated. So in the originally text, the rapporteur suggested the paragraph is enhance educational and professional opportunities for young people. We all think the same, but we added in order actively to promote their access to the labor market, since we all know that unfortunately in last period young people lost their jobs, and it is important for them to enter the labor market, and education is important in this field too, but the rapporteur would say what he suggests. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich finde den Änderungsantrag gut. Ich würde ihn nur gerne etwas modifizieren, weil der Sinn von Bildung und Ausbildung ist nicht nur für den Arbeitsmarkt, sondern auch zur Entwicklung der eigenen Persönlichkeit, so als Staatsbürger. Deswegen wollte ich nur ein kleines Wort einfügen, also, also auch, hier an die Stelle, also in order actively to promote the access to the labor market, dass das ein wichtiger Aspekt ist, aber eben nicht ausschließlich. Das ist eigentlich alles, aber es scheint kompliziert zu sein, das umzusetzen.
It's a small thing and it makes the procedure very complicated, but let's go in that with the procedure. Okay, in my opinion, the oral sub-amendment, the word also, meets the criteria of the rule 34,7,a. Is there any objection to the oral sub-amendment which just was presented? It is actually so that there should be, yeah? No? Does anyone wish to speak against this one? No one? Mrs. Kovacs, your opinion? You're in favor? And the committee is, I suppose, also in favor for this one. Now I will put the
unanimity.
Unanimity, total unanimity. Okay, that's why it's so complicated, bureaucratic way, because we must vote them 2 times, because one word. But now we will do it. Now we put the oral sub-amendment number 1 to vote. So please, the vote is open. Vote is closed. Oh, almost unanimously approved. And now, because of bureaucracy, we should actually move to the main amendment as amended. Does anyone want to speak against the amended amendment? No. Committee obviously supports this one. And now we will put the whole amendment number 6 to the vote once again. The vote is open. Vote is closed. The result. Clearly approved, unanimously almost, consensus clear. Now we move to the amendment number 2. Mr. Hunko, you would like to say a few words to support the amendment number 2?
Ja, vielen Dank. Hier geht es auch noch mal um die Notwendigkeit der Ausdehnung der Produktionskapazitäten für Covid-19-Impfstoffe und auch für Medikamente weltweit. Also das, was wir auch schon mal angesprochen haben, weiter vorne. Aber ich glaube, es macht hier an der Stelle auch noch mal Sinn. Deshalb noch mal dieser Änderungsantrag an dieser Stelle.
Does anyone want to speak against? Opinion of the committee?
Faveur avec une large majorité.
Clear majority. Now I shall put the amendment number 2 vote. The vote is open. Vote is closed, and the result. Amendment number 2 is agreed. Oh, how nice figures. Now we go to amendment number 8. Mr. Kovacs, you want to support amendment number 8. Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you, distinguished chair. Here we suggest adding a paragraph, combat all forms of gender-based violence and domestic violence. I think this is a place where I don't need to explain that violence against women, so gender-based violence is a clear violation of human rights, and it also has its own economic perspective, so we all feel and understood the importance of this issue. Thank you.
Madam, you need not to explain, I suppose. So is anyone against? I suppose no, and I think that the committee is exactly in the same opinion. Clearly, I put the amendment number 8 to vote. The vote is open. Vote is closed. Result. Yes, it's approved with great majority. Now we go to amendment number 9. I call Mrs. Kovacs on behalf of the committee to support, please.
Thank you. Gender pay gap is also a topic I believe we all think the same. We just suggested to make this paragraph more strongly because we think that introducing a system of checks and balances is not sufficient to eliminate gender pay gaps or other types of discrimination in employment, and far more ambitious positive measures are needed to achieve real and lasting improvement in this field, especially in the face of the lasting impact of the pandemic. Thank you.
Anyone against? No. Committee, obviously, for this one. So I will put the amendment number 9 to vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Result. It's clearly approved. Amendment number 9. We go to the last amendment, number 10. Mrs. Kovacs.
Almost at the end of the resolution, we suggested adding a new paragraph. We'll try to read it to be clear. So ensure that crisis response bodies and those working on necessary measures are gender balanced, diverse and inclusive. It is important for all of us, and that their work must also be evidence-based. I tried to explain at the committee meeting what does it mean. So notably through the use of data, evidence-based data, disaggregated by gender and other discrimination grounds, and gender sensitive, ensuring that equality is mainstreamed throughout. Thank you.
Does anyone want to speak against? Mr. Huko.
Nein, ich bin überhaupt nicht dagegen. Ich möchte die Gelegenheit noch mal nutzen, weil ich das nicht mehr kann, um dem Sekretariat und der Aiste Ramanauskaite zu danken für diese wunderbare Zusammenarbeit. Vielen Dank.
I suppose these thanks were really worth. Now committee. Committee is 4. I put the amendment number 10 and vote. Vote is open. Vote is closed. The result. Clearly approved. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the stage that we have the whole draft resolution to put on the vote. So whole draft resolution is now on the vote. The vote is open. Vote is. We'll wait. This is the draft resolution. Let's wait it that everybody can vote. Vote is closed, and the result. Congratulations, Mr. Huko, and everybody. Clear majority, clear majority. Wow, wow. Practically unanimity. The draft resolution is approved, and now we go to the last stage of this process. We are having the draft recommendation, and there is one amendment for the draft recommendation. I call Mrs. Kovacs, please.
Thank you. The collective complaint system creates a unique and powerful mechanism for enforcing social rights under the Social Charter, as well as equality and non-discrimination in the enjoyment of these rights. Yet, from 47 member states of the Council of Europe, only 16 Council of Europe member states have so far accepted it. That's the reason why we thought it is important to stress it here in the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Does anyone want to speak against? No. Committee opinion for. I put the amendment number 11 to vote. The vote is open. Okay, the vote is closed. Result. Clearly approved. Now we go to the draft recommendation as a whole, and 2/3 majority is required for this. I will put the whole draft recommendation now to the vote. Vote is open. Vote is closed, and the results. Clearly approved. That's the end of this item. Thanks very much for your active participation. We will still continue the discussion about COVID, now on the children's rights, related to children's rights, but unfortunately I have to leave, and I suppose there's a next chair for the meeting coming. Thank you very much for this afternoon.
Good evening, everybody. After debating many aspects of the COVID-19 today, the next item of the business is the debate on the report titled Impact of the COVID-19 Pandemic on Children's Rights, document 15311, presented by Baroness Doreen Massey on behalf of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. In order to finish by 7:30 p.m., I will interrupt the list of the speakers at about 7:20 p.m. to allow time for the reply and the vote. Now I call Baroness Massey, Rapporteur. You have 10 minutes in total, of which 7 minutes is for your opening remarks and 3 minutes for your reply after. Yes, the floor is for Rapporteur Baroness Massey.
Mr. President and colleagues, I hope you're well wherever you are. I hope you're well wherever you are. Sorry, a bit of echo there. It's a great pleasure to follow my colleague Andrei Hunko, who has spoken with great passion and insight about his report. I'm passionate about the impact of COVID on the lives of children, particularly vulnerable children. The pandemic has made their lives very difficult. Some children's services were under great pressure before COVID, and they've deteriorated. The rights of children, as defined in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, have been neglected. Rights such as health, education, socializing, protection of violence, and the right to be heard. This neglect is not surprising in a crisis such as COVID, where priorities for governments have been contested. How we must now work to redress deficits for children. So we must act, and act promptly, to protect children's rights. It's our moral duty as politicians and professionals to advocate and carry out reforms to systems and structures which will help children to make up for lost time, but also to provide sustained support to children and their families. This Assembly can help to promote action and look upon the pandemic as a stimulus for change for children. I shall summarise some of my recommendations at the end of my report. I want to say something first of all about the process of developing this report. The Secretariat of the Social Committee worked with their usual efficient speed and manner to research the situation of children during COVID. We related this to children's rights as expressed in the UN Convention and in other conventions and declarations, including those on violence against children. I was able to interview a large number of people, including those working with children, EU commissioners, professionals in health, MEP people, those in education, including sport and the arts and child rights. It was encouraging in all these interviews and seminars to see the strong wish of all concerned to collaborate with the Council of Europe and across organisation in Europe and beyond. They also spoke with enthusiasm of the need to enhance the participation of children in decision-making through dialogue and consultation. This support for collaboration and cooperation bodes well for the future if we can build on it. In speaking with children, COVID was generally experienced as frightening, disorientating, and stressful. But some children said they enjoyed more time to think, to be able to plan their lives and have contact with family. This, however, was not the general picture. It applied mainly to children from more affluent and stable backgrounds. For others, many families have fallen into deeper poverty. Child abuse and domestic abuse increased. Socialising with friends has been affected. Schools have been closed with no access to sport, the arts, or other cultural experiences. All this has resulted in a sense of isolation, leading to a decline of mental health. Babies and small children have also suffered loss of contact with adults and family members, in particular grandparents, which could impact on their future development. I describe in the report areas of particular concern and threats to children's rights. These are physical and mental health and well-being, protection from violence, access to education, health and other services, poverty and socio-economic inequality, children in vulnerable situations, children's participation in decision-making related to their own welfare. Children who may already be disadvantaged are particularly at risk. Such children include those with disabilities, those in poverty and poor social conditions, immigrants and refugees, and those suffering from discrimination or prejudice related to race, religion, sexuality, and gender. The question is, where do we go from here? If things remain even the same as before this pandemic, children will fall into greater poverty and disadvantage. And we as politicians can help in our own countries by advocating for children, questioning our governments on their strategies for recovery, listening to children and the voluntary sector for their ideas. I believe that we must use COVID as a spur to action, working with children to improve areas of deficit. Societies can and must take action. The report suggests recommendations to the Assembly and to the Committee of Ministers. These are not, of course, exclusive and will vary according to existing conditions in countries. I hope the College will find the recommendations useful in pressing for action on the impact of COVID-19 on children's rights. They are as follows. I believe that the Parliamentary Assembly can urge Member States to firstly build resilient social protection systems for children and their carers, including ensuring minimum levels of income, paying attention to vulnerable families and children, and to developing recovery plans with strategies and sufficient budgets. Secondly, ensuring that services for children and their workers are adequately funded and ensure collaboration in the delivery of these services, such as education and health. Thirdly, including in all policies and legislation, assessments of their impact on children. Fourthly, pay particular attention to and combat the devastating effects of violence against children, including online harms. The report recommends that the Council of Ministers firstly could consider a review of the post-pandemic recovery programmes of Member States from the perspective of the rights of the child, based on the UN Convention. Secondly, endorse the proposals of the Secretary-General of the Council of Europe on reinforcing the European Social Charter and convene a conference with the parties to make sure that children's rights are taken into account and to consider an additional protocol on effective social protection in times of crisis. Thirdly, they could call a pan-European seminar to actively promote collaboration and cooperation between the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council of Europe, with the aims of consolidating a strategy for the future action on the impact of COVID on children. I now very much look forward to the contribution of colleagues. You, colleagues, have experience of the impact of COVID-19 in your own countries, and we have an opportunity to share those experiences and to contribute to promoting the welfare of children. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness, for keeping the time limit, and special thanks from me as father of three in the school age. Now we will start the debate, continue the debate with the persons of the political groups. The floor is for Mr. Fırat Bençika from Belgium. On behalf of the Socialist Group, the floor is yours. Did he ask the floor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you, Madam Rapporteur, for your excellent work. The impact of the pandemic on children's rights has been immense. The measures taken to address COVID-19 might worsen inequalities and discrimination of LGBTI children and young people. Social isolation and lack of connection to supportive peers can lead to severe mental health issues. This is especially true for those whose families are not supportive of their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. The imposed lockdown means that many LGBTI children and young people are victims to an increased risk of domestic and family violence, sexual and psychological abuse, other forms of violence. Depression and suicide rates have increased significantly among LGBTI young people because for many, school was an opportunity to find freedom to be themselves when their families are unsupportive. Therefore, state must take into consideration the increased risk of LGBTI children and young people with unsupportive families when implementing domestic violence measures and protect the rights linked to physical integrity. COVID-19 has also shifted medical care priorities. Specific health care to trans and intersex children and young people may be seen as non-urgent to some states. However, cancellation or postpone of ongoing hormonal therapy and surgical aftercare can lead to physical problems and mental health issues. States should ensure that this access to vital care of LGBTI children is provided. LGBTI children are particularly vulnerable to negative consequences from crisis. It's crucial that their issues are considered and that LGBTI organizations are involved in emergency planning process to guarantee their protection. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now the floor is for EPP spokesperson, Mr. Alain Milon. He was supposed to be in the hemicycle.
Je remercie tout d'abord la baronne Dorine Massé pour son rapport qui permet à notre Assemblée de débattre d'un sujet qui nous tient tous à cœur, mais qui est probablement largement sous-estimé. La crise de la Covid-19 a été, pour bon nombre de nos concitoyens, une véritable épreuve, mais les enfants sont particulièrement vulnérables et ont probablement moins exprimé que d'autres catégories de la population le choc qu'a représenté pour eux cette période. Les conséquences de la pandémie sur la santé physique et mentale des enfants me semblent être des plus préoccupantes. Les confinements répétés ont soumis les enfants à un isolement qui n'est toujours pas bien compris ou bien vécu par eux. D'autant que les conditions de logement sont, comme l'a dit la baronne, très variables. Comme le souligne la résolution, ce sont les groupes les plus pauvres au sein de la société et les pays à faible revenu qui ont été les plus touchés. L'impact de cet isolement sur la santé mentale des enfants est encore mal évolué. Il faudra sensibiliser les établissements scolaires à cette question pour permettre de repérer les enfants qui auraient éventuellement besoin d'un soutien psychologique. De plus, l'arrêt des activités sportives essentielles, nous le savons, au bien-être des enfants, peut favoriser certains troubles, je pense en particulier à l'obésité. On sait malheureusement aussi que le foyer familial n'est pas toujours un lieu sûr pour les enfants. Les violences physiques, psychologiques, sexuelles à leur égard ont malheureusement augmenté pendant les périodes de confinement. Celles-ci ne doivent pas rester impunies et les enfants doivent être évidemment mis en sécurité. Pour cela, les moyens dont disposent les services de protection d'enfance doivent être renforcés. Par ailleurs, la fermeture des écoles a entraîné un décrochage scolaire pour ceux dont les parents n'ont pas pu prendre le relais des enseignants à la maison et pour ceux qui ne disposent pas des outils nécessaires pour travailler à distance. Cette situation n'a fait qu'accroître les inégalités, entraînant un retard parfois difficile à rattraper. Je voudrais rappeler que l'éducation est un pilier de la démocratie et que le droit à l'éducation est consacré par la Charte sociale européenne. Permettre l'accès à l'éducation est donc une obligation. Les États partis à cette charge, tous les moyens doivent donc être mis en œuvre pour que la génération Covid ne soit pas pénalisée et encore moins sacrifiée. Enfin, la pandémie a accru les difficultés financières de certaines familles. Certaines risquent aujourd'hui de devoir quitter leur logement. En France, le gouvernement a pris des dispositions pour interrompre les expulsions durant la pandémie, mais aujourd'hui, ce sont près de 30 000 familles qui risquent de se retrouver à la rue. Face à ces situations qui peuvent être dramatiques, il est nécessaire de rechercher des solutions au cas par cas en s'appuyant sur les associations et les organismes qui travaillent au plus près des personnes en difficulté. Le soutien de l'État sera nécessaire pour permettre le financement des mesures sociales adéquates. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Milon. Now may I invite Madame Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo for ALDE Group.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, lorsque nous parlons d'enfants, nous parlons de notre futur, du futur de nos sociétés et de l'humanité. Protéger ces générations, former un enfant, aider à sa construction, c'est préparer l'avenir. Madame la rapporteure, le groupe ALDE vous remercie pour votre travail constructif et si réaliste. Ce travail, nous le savons, vous l'avez fait avec discernement, en y mettant tout votre cœur et toujours dans l'intérêt supérieur des enfants. Quand je pense à la Convention de Lanzarote, entrée en vigueur le 1er juillet 2010, je pense que nous avons failli collectivement pendant cette crise sanitaire. Nous avons été incapables d'assurer la protection de tous les jeunes et beaucoup d'entre eux figurent sur la liste des grands oubliés de la Covid-19. 2 questions. L'urgence de la situation a-t-elle conduit les autorités à prendre des décisions trop rapidement en négligeant les enfants? A-t-on sous-estimé l'impact du confinement sur leur construction et leur bien-être? Madame, vous avez évoqué beaucoup de situations auxquelles ces enfants ont été confrontés durant la pandémie et c'est avec tristesse qu'il ne nous reste qu'à constater les effets néfastes et trop nombreux sur cette jeunesse. L'isolement rencontré par une grande partie de ces enfants, surtout ceux issus de catégories moins avantagées, a été dévastateur. Stress, anxiété, peur, inquiétude, parfois générés par des parents dépassés, ont été leurs compagnons d'infortune. Avec une école à l'arrêt, les progrès scolaires ont été anéantis pour certains et des difficultés d'apprentissage sont apparues, creusant un écart encore plus grand entre nos jeunes. Bien trop de dégâts sur les plus vulnérables, entraînant bien malgré nous des inégalités de chance. Dois-je rappeler qu'une fraction d'enfants bénéficie d'un repas ou de soins essentiels grâce au système scolaire et que la fermeture des écoles a entraîné des problèmes de malnutrition et d'autres privations souvent dues aux difficultés économiques rencontrées par les familles? Avec une constatation alarmante, les enfants souffrant de handicap ont payé un lourd tribut lors de cette pandémie. La fermeture des centres d'accueil les ont isolés et a eu des conséquences quasi irrémédiables sur leur progression. Les aidants n'ont pas pu être soulagés avec les risques de violence que l'on connaît. Oui, les violences, tant physiques que psychologiques, sur les enfants ont été accrues pendant la Covid-19 et ont atteint un niveau insoutenable pour nous parlementaires qui défendons le droit de vivre à l'abri de toute violence. Ce soir, chers collègues, nous avons la possibilité d'agir en soutenant ce rapport pour rendre espoir et sourire à nos enfants. Je vous remercie.
Sorry, thanks a lot. Now the floor is for Ms. Sevinç Vatalieva, spokesperson of the EC Conservative Group. Sevinç Hanım, the floor is yours.
Very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Probably most of the speeches will be repeated because we all are united in one idea, that we have to support children during the COVID-19 pandemic. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Madame the Baroness Mercy for her excellent report and thank her for attracting attention to children's rights in COVID times and raising this issue, important issue. The pandemic is not over. And we're still learning how to live in this situation, how to survive, how to protect ourselves, our close ones, our health from one side, and how to preserve the lifestyle we all used to before. If for adults it's a great challenge, for children it becomes a great threat. Children suffer from physical, emotional, psychological effect of COVID-19, especially in the countries established lockdowns, confinement measures. These all affect children's mental and physical health, education, family environment, their psychological condition. Children's right to education was also violated. About 200 countries all over the world closed schools, providing distant learning option, which is trying to substitute the traditional one. In some countries, children do not have proper access to technologies and internet. This causes problem in getting proper education. We have to remember that schools are not just about learning and education, but it's also about socializing. Thus, pandemic affects children's communication skills. Growth of violence is another problem occurred during the pandemic. Lockdowns increased children's chance to become witness of domestic violence within the families, as well as becoming victims of psychological and physical violence. Since children as well as adults started spending much of the time online, whether for education, entertainment, or communication purposes, using different online platforms raise a risk of becoming a victim of digital violence, the threat of sexual abuse, exploitation, discrimination. In situations when families are losing confidence between members and psychological help is not available, children become more fragile and vulnerable when they have no one to share their fears. Indeed, The pandemic caused not only delay, but also reverse major progress made recently. States must respond to COVID-19 with an effective child right-based approach that protects and benefits those who are most vulnerable, while also furthering efforts to respect, safeguard, and fulfill children's rights. In this complicated situation, states should pay more attention to child protection and child rights, maintain basic services such as health care, water, sanitation, education, birth registration, and take focused action to protect children in vulnerable situations. A fundamental factor must be the child's best interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sevinç Hanım. Is Mr. Petrogoulas in the hemicycle? I couldn't see him. Then we continue with the individual speakers. I hope they respect also the time limits to finish on time. First speaker is Mr. G.V. Mikanadze from Georgia. The floor is yours. Mr. Mikanadze? Connected, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to thank the rapporteur for the incredible work and precious information set out in the report. At the same time, I would like to talk more about the Georgian practice concerning the issue. COVID-19 presents unprecedented risk to the rights, safety and development of children. In Georgia as well in other countries of the world, the pandemic has made a negative impact on children. A digital transformation has played a key role in the COVID-19 emergency response to safeguard essential health, education and social services for children. The government, with support from UNICEF, has developed online learning projects to reach an estimated 414,000 children and has developed remote and hybrid social services, a specialized TV program and a Facebook page to support parents of children with disabilities. Online learning resources to reach school students, as well as the guidelines for teachers and schools, have been developed, and the training of elementary teachers in distance teaching techniques have been conducted. In cooperation with the Georgian public broadcaster, a TV school was launched throughout Georgia for children who did not have relevant digital equipment or any internet coverage. The TV school covered every level of the national education curriculum and was accompanied by the sign language translation and was also available in Armenian and Azerbaijani languages. It is worth mentioning that 87% of children aged 6-18 years were involved in distance learning. Among them, 9.5% are children with disabilities or with special educational needs. Of all the types of distance learning, 26% of the children used the TV school, 20% used internet communications, 49% attended the classes online, and up to 5% used paper support materials. More than 200,000 parents have benefited from the USAID-supported campaign, Parenting After Isolation, which offered webinars, quizzes, video blogs, reading materials, and social media cards to help them support their children. Special advice on how to communicate with children during the isolation and help them with homeschooling was also provided. The survey to assess the impact of the pandemic lockdown on children in Georgia has shown that 21% of girls and 20% of boys showed signs of stress and anxiety during the pandemic, indicating that the pandemic period had almost an equal impact on the mental health of female and male children. More than 8,000 adolescents received support for their mental health and emotional well-being in 2020. To address high levels of anxiety and depression among children in Georgia, online consultations for children and parents were launched. In addition, adolescents took part in online webinars on psychological and emotional stability, on coping with stress and behavioral disorders. Notwithstanding the past efforts, we continue to work to make progress and are eager to not only defeat this pandemic, but to transform the way we nurture and invest in the younger generations. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Now the floor is for Mr. Badia from Romania online. He is present? Okay. Okay. He is in the hemicycle, sorry. It is...
Thank you, Presidente. Allora, prima di tutto vorrei ringraziare la baronessa Massey, praticamente diventata la voce dei bambini nell'emiciclo, per l'iniziativa di creare questa relazione che riporta alla nostra attenzione i problemi con cui vengono confrontarsi i bambini nel contesto epidemiologico presente generato dalla pandemia del Covid-19. Sono contento di ritrovare nel progetto di risoluzione dei riferimenti sulla situazione dei bambini i cui genitori sono al lavoro all'estero, argomento che, come sapete, l'ho discusso durante i lavori della Commissione per uguaglianza e non discriminazione, e il quale si è concluso con la ratifica di una risoluzione e di una raccomandazione sullo stesso tema. Il settore dell'insegnamento, in Romania per esempio, si è confrontato come qualsiasi Stato con una serie di difficoltà in questi tempi, e vorrei presentare come un esempio di buone pratiche il programma che si chiama Telescuola, il quale dopo la sospensione delle ore con la presenza fisica in classe ha rappresentato un'alternativa utile per gli studenti di corsi finali che dovevano preparare gli esami nazionali. D'altronde, tramite l'agevolazione del programma nazionale, la scuola da casa, sono state acquistate 250.000 dispositivi elettronici avviati alla rete di internet per facilitare le attività dell'insegnamento a distanza per gli alunni provenienti dai medi sfavoreggianti. In più è stato approvato il programma nazionale di base, la scuola dopo la scuola, che insegue la prevenzione del fallimento scolastico e l'abbandono scolastico prematuro tramite le attività educazionali di ripescaggio che sostengono lo sviluppo per l'insegnamento e i talenti degli alunni, avendo come meta mirata quei alunni che dispongono di un accesso limitato oppure senza accesso per l'insegnamento online oppure a distanza nel contesto della pandemia del Covid-19, essendo proposto fino a 20 ore di attività di ripescaggio al mese. Tuttavia c'è in corso anche un progetto di grandezza che si chiama Curriculum Rilevante, l'insegnamento aperto a tutti, stanziato in parte dal Fondo Sociale Europeo e che ha come meta la prevenzione dell'abbandono scolastico tramite la messa in pratica delle misure sistemiche basate specialmente sullo sviluppo delle competenze dei 55.000 professori dell'insegnamento primario e secondario. Queste sono soltanto poche caratteristiche del modo in cui la Romania ha gestito durante la pandemia l'accesso dei bambini all'insegnamento, soprattutto a quelli che provengono dai medi sfavoreggianti, che ho voluto condividere con voi. Vi ringrazio per l'attenzione e voglio sottolineare fortemente ancora una volta il mio sostegno per questa relazione, evidentemente per la risoluzione e la raccomandazione concluse nella relazione. Grazie.
Thank you, Mr. Badia, and sorry for the mistake in the list about your presence in the hemicycle. Now we continue with Mrs. Pervin Kerimzadeh from Azerbaijan. She is marked online here, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposed document is dedicated to a very important issue. Children are among one of the most suffered groups from the pandemic. It should be noted that during this period, children had to spend more time at home because kindergarten, schools, and children's entertainment centers did not work. This situation has led to many psychological problems in children, such as communication, behavior, aggression, sleep, food, and so on. These children have already been referred to as the Generation COVID, and they may have serious cognitive, academic, and emotional difficulties in the future. When it comes to education, children adapted to the new educational conditions. A number of successful steps have been taken in our country to provide the continuity of education. Along with migrating lessons to online platforms, a lot of work has been done to organize TV lessons at the level of general education. TV lessons provided accessibility reaching out and involving 1.6 school children. Our country's largest national online platform, Virtual School, has been made available to school children. More than 1 million teachers and students are registered on the platform. Moreover, competitions, training, and cultural events are organized online, which help to increase motivation of children. The list I'd like to speak briefly. There have been pains in the past, but we must focus on the future. The future is in our hands. Thus, we think about the present and the future of children when making all kinds of decisions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Pervin Hanım. Now the floor is for Ms. Ana Maria Gavrila from Romania. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, please allow me to congratulate our rapporteur, Baroness Doreen Macy, for her report and draft resolution. It is, however, regrettable that the report does not question one of the most important consequences of the pandemic on children's rights, and that's the vaccination of children with the anti-COVID vaccine. We therefore consider the report to be incomplete, and we express our deepest concern regarding the vaccination of children. We agree that the children have suffered the most in the pandemic. They are in a development phase, and we intruded that process without having the courage to be leaders and martyrs and protect their growth and development at any price, especially when we understood that they are statistically immune to COVID. The recommendation of the report to include children in the decision-making process is excellent, and we should endeavor to give the parents of these children a balanced view on the long-term consequences of vaccination against COVID. Also, the vaccination should only be allowed with the consent of both parents. However, unfortunately, we do not have the evidence with regards to the long-term consequences of a vaccine that contain the messages that tells our cells what to do. More medical literature in the US, UK, and Israel describe cases of pericarditis and myocarditis in vaccinated children and teenagers. There is therefore no justification to intentionally subject them to risk that endangers their life. As such, it does raise questions of medical ethics, as doctors should adhere to the principle, first do no harm. Studies have shown that children were not the primary drivers of COVID-19 in their communities. Still, we, the protectors and guardians of children, subject them to not fully tested vaccines and endanger their lives, so potentially save the lives of people who already lived and enjoyed the most years of their life expectancy. Is this our legacy to the next generation of Europeans that already struggle with natality and migration? There seems to be a full-on experiment with vaccination of children in Romania. It reached 100,000 children vaccinated today. By contrast, in Germany, the Standing Commission on Vaccination refused to send a recommendation to support the vaccination of all children and limited that to the children with health conditions. Given the fact that the vaccine is still in an experimental phase, that we do not know the consequences in the long term and therefore cannot inform the parents so that they are taking an aware decision to whether to vaccinate their children, we consider the vaccination of children to be a grave infringement on their human rights. The question is, are we going to sit here and risk to be reminded by the history as the generation who possibly took the right to a healthy and normal life of the next generation, or are we going to make the utmost effort to protect our children? Thank you.
Thank you. Now we continue with Ms. Dubravka Filipovski from Serbia.
Thank you, Chairman. The corona pandemic has changed the way of life people all over the world. That is why, as a member of the Committees for the Rights of the Child in the Serbian Parliament, I share the concerns of colleagues and the professional public about the negative impact of the pandemic on children's rights. The pandemic left strong physical, emotional, and psychological consequences on the children. During a pandemic, children are more vulnerable to violence, trafficking, and exploitation. That is why the UN Committee of the Rights of the Child appealed to the governments all of countries to make child protection services, SOS hotlines, including SMS services, available 24 hours a day. I believe that we are all familiar with the fact that 1.5 billion children around the world do most of their activities from home, so education and socialization have moved to the internet. That is why, for many parents, the question of how to ensure the safety of their children online is more important now than ever before. Dear colleagues, I would like to share with you the results of the research Children's Voice in the Time of COVID-19 by the international organization World Vision, which included 101 children from 30 countries via an online survey. The research showed that all surveyed children singled out 3 important facts that brought the change during the pandemic: termination of regular schooling, emotional stress caused by the need for social distance, and increasing poverty. At the same time, all surveyed children expect a desire to be involved in the process of fight against the pandemic using all available channels of online education and influencing through peer support. Dear colleagues, in many member states during the pandemic, there was not recognition to the needs of children with special needs who do not live with both parents or suffer from certain disease. That is why I see this report by Baroness Messi as a roadmap to eliminate and mitigate their failure, and for Council of Europe member states to receive additional guidance on how to improve the rights of children in their countries during and after the pandemic.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Filipovski. Now the floor is for Ms. Tamar Tariashvili from Georgia.
Mr. President, Madam Baroness, let me thank you for an excellent report. I believe all of us agree with you and share your attitude. The COVID pandemic has grave consequences for children's well-being and their rights, above all causing immediate socio-economic impact, directly affecting child protection risks. Let me share with you that children constitute one of the direct target groups of the Georgian state anti-COVID crisis plan. An important decision was to identify all vulnerable groups among children and to set priorities. The anti-crisis plan paid special attention to children with disabilities, representatives of the ethnic minorities, and those living near the occupation borderline. In the frame of the anti-crisis plan, in total of 930,000 children under 18 have received the one-time universal monetary assistance. In addition to this, monthly financial assistance to children living in the socially vulnerable families doubled starting July the 1st this year. Prior to this, Georgia increased the financial assistance program 5 times. At the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, the education process in Georgia switched to the distance learning, and my colleague has talked about those measures that have been taken to provide quality education. The steps taken by the government of Georgia to ensure a continuous education process in the context of the global pandemic were named by the international organizations as one of the best examples in the world. Having said this, we realize that still gaps remained in accessing computers and quality internet, psychological challenges, limitations for the persons with disabilities and their families. Unfortunately, let me tell you that alarming is the situation in the occupied territories. Coronavirus pandemic has further aggravated the situation of children's rights there. Recently, Georgian Parliament's Education and Science Committee has launched a parliamentary research of the COVID impact on general education. We aim to set the mechanisms to mitigate the pandemic damage and to remediate the skills and knowledge for school students for equal future opportunities. We believe that child rights should not be the matter of the social privilege. Thus, we need new creative approaches to better prevent grave socio-economic consequences of the crisis on children's right protection in the future. And I believe this report will serve this role. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I call Mr. Konstantinos Efstatiou from Cyprus to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, allow me to congratulate Baroness Doreen Massey for her excellent work. This report is a result of much hard work and extensive research and proves her sensitivity on the matter. Safeguarding the child's best interest is the driving force behind this report, and I commend our colleague for upholding this fundamental principle throughout her report. Firstly, allow me to fully endorse and adopt Mrs. Gavrila Anna Maria from Romania concern on the health issues and health treatment of our children during the pandemic. The way we treat our children, anticipate their vulnerabilities, and meet their needs is reflective of the quality and resilience of our own democratic society. The pandemic has exposed pre-existing inequalities in our societies, but also the many shortages and deficiencies in dealing with children. In the framework of my own research as regards the implications of COVID-19 pandemic in the educational and cultural sectors of the Culture Committee, I had the opportunity to discuss at length in my own country, Cyprus, the very harsh implications the pandemic has had on children with disabilities and their parents regarding their access to educational and other essential public services and the inadequacy of existing measures. Our findings have demonstrated that these children and their families have been facing increased difficulties, sometimes even unsurmountable ones, that have directly impacted and further eroded their physical and mental well-being. In order for us to build resilient social protection systems, we must invest in the efficient restructuring of public services and provide adequate training and support to staff in health, education, and other social services. We must prioritize, as a matter of political urgency, that all children remain protected in accordance with international standards and relevant Council of Europe instruments. Governments must remain committed to their international contractual obligations and adapt legislation whenever necessary in order to offer the best level of protection to our children. Lastly, in this post-pandemic period, it is important to seize the opportunity to rectify existing and persisting failures and shortages. It is a matter of political will that will ultimately cement the future of our children, especially of the children in need, or, on the contrary, hamper their ability to live in a safe environment conducive to their physical and mental well-being. After all, Mr. President, the way in which we treat vulnerability proves the standard of our own civilization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Madam Serap Yaşar from Turkey online.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je tiens à remercier Madame la rapporteure pour son travail complet. Alors que les enfants ont été largement affectés par les effets directs du COVID-19 sur la santé, la pandémie a de graves conséquences sur leur bien-être. De plus, les effets nuisibles de cette pandémie ne sont pas également répartis. Ils sont les plus dommageables pour les enfants dans des situations déjà défavorisées. Et parmi les plus vulnérables se trouvent les enfants migrants et réfugiés. En tant que reporter sur les enfants migrants et réfugiés disparus en Europe, je suis particulièrement préoccupée par les effets de la pandémie de COVID-19 sur les droits des enfants migrants et réfugiés. Les besoins des enfants réfugiés sont devenus plus aigus En raison de la pandémie, les enfants déplacés font partie des personnes dont l'accès aux tests, aux traitements et à d'autres services essentiels est le plus restreint. Les efforts d'atténuation de la pandémie, tels que les fermetures et les couvre-feux, ont également des conséquences négatives sur l'éducation et la sécurité des enfants réfugiés. Comme la Turquie accueille 3,7 millions de réfugiés, dont 1,75 million sont des enfants, nous accordons une attention particulière à leurs besoins en cette période difficile. Dans nos programmes d'aide et de soutien, les femmes et les enfants sont prioritaires. Les enfants reçoivent des traitements mentaux et physiques par des psychiatres, des psychologues cliniciens, des spécialistes du développement des enfants et des professionnels de la santé. Les réfugiés et les migrants sont également traités de la même manière que les citoyens turcs dans nos programmes de traitement et de vaccination contre le Covid-19. Tout réfugié ou citoyen turc de plus de 25 ans a actuellement droit au vaccin Covid-19, avec plus de 40 millions de doses administrées. En tant que membre de PCE, nous devons faire tout notre possible pour garantir que les réfugiés reçoivent les vaccins et les soins nécessaires, ainsi qu'un soutien en ce temps difficile. Merci pour votre attention. Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Serap Hanım. Now I give the floor to Madame Martine Bonner from France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En introduction, merci chaleureux à notre collègue, la baronesse Massé, pour la qualité de son rapport. En tant que présidente de la sous-commission des enfants, bien évidemment, il était important de rappeler que nos enfants sont en première ligne face aux mesures restrictives, de la fermeture des écoles au port du masque qui ne sont plus, ces enfants qui ne sont plus à considérer comme des dommages collatéraux de cette crise, mais bien comme des victimes de premier ordre. Ce sont bien eux qui ont pâti de la désinformation, de l'incertitude ambiante et de la perte de tous leurs repères dans un monde qui sensiblement n'est plus celui qu'ils connaissaient. Alors que nous étions occupés à déterminer le nombre de respirateurs artificiels et plans de relance, les jeunes, quant à eux, faisaient face à un isolement sans précédent, les coupant d'une vie sociale pourtant déterminante, comme nous le savons. Accusés de tuer leurs aïeux, d'être des porteurs de virus et de ne pas respecter les gestes barrières, ils se sont vus infliger une charge morale qui aujourd'hui pèse sur leur santé mentale. Physiquement, ils font face à une recrudescence de la violence et de la discrimination à leur égard, les rendant encore plus vulnérables qu'ils ne l'étaient déjà. Pour exemple, comment nos gouvernements ont pu contraindre des enfants à porter des masques, et qui plus est des enfants parfois en difficulté, sourds notamment, alors que nous savons que nombre des aptitudes au langage et à la communication, cruciales pour leur avenir, se développent à ces âges. Mes chers collègues, il est temps d'endiguer cette crise de la jeunesse et de leur redonner le droit d'interagir, de découvrir, le droit à une éducation égalitaire et tout simplement le droit de vivre. Leur avenir hostile comme incertain devra être assuré à travers des mesures certes économiques en relançant les financements qui leur sont alloués, mais l'objectif doit s'étendre au-delà des frontières de la protection sociale comme nous la connaissons. Redonner le droit de grandir à ces enfants passera par une attention toute particulière de leurs besoins. Protéger les plus jeunes de nos concitoyens passera aussi par une protection contre les mesures liberticides et infondées envers nos enfants. Cela commence dès maintenant en évitant de vacciner nos plus jeunes en l'attente d'études plus poussées, en privilégiant un retour à la vie normale et en préservant au mieux le droit d'apprendre aux fondements de leur apprentissage de la vie. Et si je tiens à parler de la vaccination, c'est que l'OMS elle-même a rendu un avis daté d'hier sur la prudence extrême et surtout la non-nécessité de vacciner les enfants à partir de 12 ans. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Madam. Now I give the floor to Mr. Joseph O'Reilly from Ireland.
Try to connect again.
Mr. O'Reilly, could you connect again, reconnect, and request to speak? If he can connect later, we can return to him because we have 10 minutes only. Let's continue with the next speaker, Mr. Socio-economic from Armenia.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I would also like to join in congratulating Baroness Messi for her excellent work, where she has looked at the COVID pandemic and its challenges from the angle how the children, the most vulnerable and most beloved group, are facing. But a story that I want to tell you is a very simple one. On March 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, the UN General Secretary called for an armistice all around the world because of the pandemic. The Azerbaijan didn't quite understand the term of the armistice and the ceasefire and used the opportunity of COVID for launching an aggression against Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. But the story is not only that. This is just to demonstrate the way of thinking, because even in the worst medieval times, people didn't launch wars during the plagues. But again, to the situation on ground. There were people, children, who couldn't enjoy their education. Like every other child in the world, they were confined to their homes. But now, with the war advancing, they were learning a very bitter lesson, that their homes can be bombed, that their schools can be destroyed, their hospitals can be destroyed, and the worst of all, they were learning that their parents had to take them and flee somewhere, or they had to go and die. And they were seeing a situation when there was a two-front war, one against the COVID that everybody in the world was fighting, and another one against the aggression, against the drones, against the mercenaries, and all of that. Just to put some numbers for you to clarify, clearly to get the situation, about 40,000 children had to leave their homes in order to be salvaged from the aggression during the pandemic, and many of them had to leave it so fast that they were not able even to take documents, necessary clothes, anything with them. This discussion can be very important because I don't want any child anywhere on this world to learn this kind of a lesson. Because I want them to have their education at schools with their peers in a peaceful manner where they can enjoy their rights. But when this kind of a lesson is taught to a child, this is something that is very problematic. Another thing that I want to stress or underline, it's important that the international community has been helpful in providing humanitarian aid to these children and to their families. Because I think that only the compassion at these kind of very tragic moments truly can tell the children something about their future that then can impact the humanity. Once again, Baroness, thank you very much for your report. And I hope that we are sincere in our discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is Mr. Reilly reconnected from Ireland?
No.
No, okay, then we should continue with Miss Tatevi Khairapetyan from Armenia.
Thank you. My colleague has just brought up an important issue while the world was fighting pandemic. Children in Artsakh were in the shelters. So one of the 8-year-old Marija remembers, says, we were lucky it was Sunday. Otherwise, if we had gone to school, it would be very hard to survive. As a result, actually, of the Azerbaijani attack, which was accompanied by the open help from Turkey, large numbers of people have been wounded and require medical care, which has put the Armenian and Nagorno-Karabakh healthcare systems under unprecedented pressure. This strain has forced many of existing COVID-19 centers to shift their scope, and most non-emergency medical care has either been delayed or cancelled. Nagorno-Karabakh, with a population of 150,000 people, had the pandemic case before like 300 cases. However, because of the widespread destruction and displacement of people, it was virtually impossible to track the COVID-19 situation on the ground. Furthermore, regular bombardments forced residents in the major cities to seek refuge in large groups in basements and bunkers, which confined spaces, thus increasing the chances of the spread of the virus. So Geneva, according to 77 of Protocol of Geneva Convention, children shall be the object of special respect and shall be protected against any form of indecent assault. However, it was not the case during 44 days in Nagorno-Karabakh. The war had a devastating effect not only on the physical but also on the mental health of children living there. Children who have lost their parents, homes, normal life, and have looked into the eyes of death. And because, just some statistics, because of Azerbaijani aggression, 71 schools and 14 kindergartens were destroyed. Because of that aggression, accompanied by COVID pandemic, more than 8,000 children lost their right of education. As a result, 24 children were deprived to attend schools. So pandemic, accompanied by the aggression and war, destroyed lives of many Armenian children living in Nagorno-Karabakh and creating lots of pain and mental problems for them for the entire life. In the end, I want to thank you for the important topic you brought up, and I found it very important that apart from all the calls coming from international partners to fight together against pandemic, in Nagorno-Karabakh, people have to fight also against the aggression and war. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it seems Mr. Ramirez Barba is not connected. Oh, you are here. Oh, it was okay. It's online. Please take the floor.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Estimados colegas, felicito a la baronesa Dorin Massey por su extraordinario reporte. En México existen alrededor de 40 millones de niñas, niños y adolescentes, habiendo avanzado en los últimos años en la protección de sus derechos. Sin embargo, la llegada de la pandemia de COVID-19 y la errática y negligente gestión de la misma por el gobierno federal ha representado un serio retroceso en las condiciones en que se vive y se desarrolla esta población. La crisis sanitaria y sus efectos económicos en el hogar, la disminución del presupuesto dedicado a su atención, el aislamiento y distanciamiento social, el acceso no oportuno ni efectivo a los servicios de salud y de seguridad social, el gran rezago educativo y la mala alimentación, el aumento del estrés y la ansiedad y, por último, la violencia doméstica han sido determinantes del impacto negativo visto ya y que debemos dar seguimiento formal en el futuro próximo. El prolongado cierre de las escuelas y la incapacidad para impartir la educación con medios alternativos debido a la franca insuficiencia de tecnologías de la información, dispositivos electrónicos, Internet y profesorado incluido, ha afectado negativamente el proceso educativo de más de 30 millones de estudiantes, provocando el abandono escolar de más de 5 millones, comprometiendo su bienestar y oportunidades de desarrollo hacia el futuro. El derecho a la salud se vio seriamente limitado. La interrupción de la atención médica en los hospitales públicos hizo que miles de niñas y niños no recibieran sus tratamientos, con el consecuente deterioro en su salud y en muchos casos poniendo en riesgo su vida.
La evidente incapacidad del gobierno federal para mantener en operación diversos programas de atención a la salud de la niñez se expresó en casos que incluso cobraron y siguen cobrando hoy vidas, como la falta de medicamentos y tratamientos para niños con cáncer, la interrupción del programa de vacunación y la inexistencia práctica de programas para atender su salud mental ante esta crisis sanitaria y social son manifestaciones también de la mala gerencia sanitaria. Es de hacer notar que aumentaron las discusiones y tensiones en el hogar y se ha registrado un importante incremento en las llamadas de emergencias relacionadas con incidentes de violencia familiar y afectación infantil convertida en otra víctima de la incapacidad gubernamental. Como legisladores, tenemos la responsabilidad de hacer efectivo el principio constitucional del interés superior de la niñez. Con la nueva conformación del Congreso mexicano a partir de las elecciones de septiembre pasado, el Partido de Acción Nacional, que es la segunda fuerza política en México, en alianza con otros partidos de oposición, actuaremos para lograr avances significativos en favor de la niñez. Daremos avances a esta Asamblea de los Logros. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, sir. Since Madam Karamanli is neither connected nor present in the hemicycle, I give the floor to Madam Laurence Trastor-Isnar from France as the last speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, permettez-moi tout d'abord de féliciter notre collègue rapporteure, Madame la baronne Doreen-Massé, pour son excellent rapport sur l'impact de la pandémie de Covid-19 sur les droits de l'enfant. Au cours de ces mois de pandémie, nos enfants ont été confrontés à toutes sortes d'événements de nature à les affecter. Je pense évidemment au décès de proches, qui est une étape douloureuse dans la vie d'un enfant. Ils ont dû faire face, en certaines circonstances, à l'isolement ou encore à la pauvreté en raison des conséquences immédiates de la crise économique provoquée par la crise sanitaire. La réalité est que cette crise a révélé des insuffisances, des défaillances de notre société. Si nous avons de nombreuses normes, tant en droit interne qu'en droit international, qui consacrent le respect qui est dû à chaque enfant, nous devons les appliquer. Ces droits sont nombreux et nécessaires. Il s'agit par exemple du droit de recevoir une instruction, du droit d'être soigné, du droit d'être protégé de la violence ou encore du droit d'avoir des conditions de vie décentes. Collectivement, nous devons agir pour que les enfants ne soient pas les grands oubliés de cette terrible pandémie. Aussi, je souscris pleinement à ce rapport qui nous encourage à agir pour que nos États gagnent en efficacité, pour garantir ces droits dans la vie quotidienne. Ce rapport cible les principaux domaines où nous devons agir, qu'il s'agisse de la santé physique et mentale, la protection contre toutes les formes de violence, qu'elles soient physiques ou morales, ou encore la pauvreté. Je crois enfin que ce rapport propose une mesure fondamentale, qui est celle de la participation des enfants aux décisions. Dès l'adoption de la Convention internationale des droits de l'enfant, le 20 novembre 1989, cet enjeu a été appréhendé. Assurer un espace d'expression suffisant aux enfants pour qu'ils soient associés à la prise de décision est nécessaire, car qui mieux qu'eux est à même de s'exprimer sur ce qu'ils ressentent et sur ce qu'ils vivent. Cette crise nous a montré que nous devons gagner en efficacité, que notre réponse doit associer l'ensemble des acteurs, les États en premier lieu, mais aussi les collectivités, les associations, les entreprises ou encore les organisations internationales qui ont fait preuve de nombreuses initiatives. Il est essentiel que cette pandémie n'affecte pas la vie de nos enfants et plus particulièrement le droit à l'instruction. Je déplore le port du masque pendant des semaines et des semaines qui a contraint les enseignants et les enfants à avoir un système d'instruction dégradé et qui a nui à l'apprentissage de nombreux enfants. Nous ne pouvons pas accepter que cette pandémie impacte négativement la vie quotidienne de nos enfants à long terme. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you, Madam. Now I must interrupt the list of speakers, as I announced before. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present physically and remotely during the debate, but have not been able to speak, may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted from now on. That concludes the list of speakers. Now I call Baroness Messi, our reporter, to reply. You have 3 minutes, Baroness. Thank you very much. Please take the floor, Baroness. Baroness Messi, could you, if you are connected, could you request to speak, to take the floor? Is she connected?
Thank you, Mr. President. The second attempt has worked. Thank you so much. And thank you also to my colleagues for your perceptive and sympathetic comments in this very excellent debate. And I assure those people who did not manage to be heard that I will actually ask to read all those speeches that were not presented. We're all agreed on the negative impact of COVID-19. We are, as many of us said, about talking about the future. Therefore, we really must, as many have said, listen to children. We've heard about the consequences on disabled children, on migrants and refugee children, and many other valuable points, and many examples of good practice have been given. Mr. Miller, who spoke earlier on, made a very important point that we do not know yet the full impact of COVID. And I believe that some longitudinal research needs to be done on this so that we can actually learn our lessons from what we've done in COVID. As Madame Fresco-Rolfo said, many mistakes have been made, and we should learn from those. Much harm has been done, and we need not only to make amends, but to plan future action very carefully. And as another speaker said, the pandemic is not yet over. Anything could happen. And this point was made by many other speakers. I don't intend to go into the issue of vaccination of children. It's very highly controversial, and I do not know what the policies are in different countries. What is clear is that the vaccine has had a dramatic impact on the spread of COVID-19 in adults, and that the World Health Organization has made recommendations. I would like to thank, in addition to my colleagues in the Secretariat, our wonderful Children's Rights Division and the Lanzarote Committee for their constant vigilance on children's matters, on violence against children, and on many other issues to do with rights for children. More than anything, I want to say a huge thank you to my colleagues in the Social Affairs Secretariat, especially Julia Pereva, for their support and hard work. I'm also aware of the contribution of others, not just on this report, but on the welfare of children and the future. And I include in that my many colleagues tonight who've spoken, who I know are supporting children and are very concerned about what the future might bring unless we act very rapidly to counteract the damage that has been done through this pandemic. Thank you, Mr. President.
We thank you, Baroness Messi. Now, if the chairperson of the committee wish to speak, you have 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier la rapporteure, la baronesse de Massé, par son excellent travail, son excellent rapport. Je félicite aussi l'Assemblée d'avoir soulevé la question importante de l'impact de la pandémie du Covid-19 sur les droits de l'enfant. En effet, leurs droits à la vie, à la santé, au développement, à la protection sociale, à l'éducation et à la protection contre la violence et la discrimination ont été fortement affectés pendant la pandémie. Les enfants vulnérables sont davantage exposés aux conséquences négatives de la pandémie. Leur situation est encore plus préoccupante dans les pays les plus pauvres. Nous devons faire face à la recrudescence de la violence domestique, la mortalité infantile et juvénile, du travail des enfants, du mariage infantile et de la traite des enfants. Aujourd'hui, nous observons que le sommet de l'iceberg. Bientôt, nous pourrons nous rendre compte des effets multiples de cette pandémie sur la génération Covid. Ce rapport nous explique qu'il ne faut pas attendre que ces effets se fassent sentir douloureusement dans nos pays. Nous devons agir sans tarder. Nous devons anticiper et atténuer cet impact négatif dans la mesure du possible. Il nous faut aussi tout faire ce qui est en notre mesure pour empêcher que la pandémie nuise durablement aux enfants. Il est clair que la relance économique est primordiale pour le bien-être de nos sociétés, mais elle ne peut pas être efficace et soutenable sans la prise en compte de la protection des enfants. Ce rapport nous propose des pistes utiles pour arriver à cet objectif. Je vous remercie de votre participation à ce débat et de votre soutien. J'espère que ce rapport nous aidera tous et toutes à proposer une action plus forte en faveur des enfants dans nos parlements. Chaque enfant compte. Chaque enfant mérite d'être soutenu et protégé. Je vous remercie.
Special thanks to you, Chairman, and the committee members. Now the debate is closed. The Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development has presented a draft resolution and a draft recommendation document 15311, to which no amendments had been tabled. That's why now we can proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15311. Although the simple majority is enough, unanimity is most welcome. Thank you. The vote is open. Yeah. Now the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Now the draft resolution in document 15311 is adopted. Now we will proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15311. The vote is open. The two-thirds majority is required here, right? The vote is closed. May I call for the result to be displayed? Again, no negative vote. Thank you very much. The draft recommendation in document 15311 is adopted. What an honor to chair the debate of a report which draft recommendation and was adopted without any negative vote. Then the Assembly, now the sitting is adjourned. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with the agenda which was approved on Monday morning. The sitting is adjourned. Thank you all. Okay.